Chapter 101, The 100th Milestone. Ethan flipped through the Demon Realm's archives, poring over every file that chronicled the rise of the demon civilization, and, more importantly, Gei Xiaolun's rapid descent into their influence. He couldn't suppress a groan. He'd never imagined Xiaolun could be corrupted so easily, yet in retrospect it seemed inevitable. Xiaolun had always lacked inner strength, and with that infatuation, Jean inherited from Du Qiangwei, who had herself defected to the demons and then presented her demonic powers as Earth's salvation. Following suit was almost a foregone conclusion. Of course, Xiaolun hadn't formally joined the demon side, at least not yet, but the demon's subtle manipulations were already at work. A dangerous urge now welled up inside him. At the mere sight of an angel, he felt an overwhelming compulsion to destroy their subconscious. It was clear that the demonic influence was spreading like a virus, weakening his moral defenses. And then there was the illusory fairy tale playing out aboard Devil Ship No. 1, Du Qiangwei and Gei Xiaolun living in blissful union, heading toward that predictable, happily ever after. The whole scenario was enough to make Ethan's skin crawl. He leaned back and let out a low whistle. He had to admit it. Haifeng was a genius at psychological manipulation, slowly building everyone's hopes, then yanking the rug out from under them when they least expected it. Ethan frowned. If not for that fleeting happy life interlude, Gei Xiaolun would never have teetered so completely on the edge of madness. Let Xiaolun join the fray now, and the angels would surely pay a devastating price. He paused for a moment's silence in memory of the angels who'd fallen, though he knew they could all be resurrected later. The quiet didn't last. Gei Xiaolun may still be unable to activate his genetic ability fully, but his simple command of silence was enough to warp the flow of dark energy and throw every angel off balance. In the original timeline, Angel Yan had been ensnared by that very dark energy and cut down by a sudden counterstrike from the sword demon Atuo. Had it not been for that interference, or if Holy Kesha's link had remained intact, Angel Yan might well have held her own against Atuo. Far away, deep within a hidden chamber carved into the Grand Canyon, the 3 permanent members of the United Nations Security Council gathered for an urgent video conference. The situation in the beautiful nation had deteriorated beyond hope. Demon swarms and ravenous gluttons had overrun every city. The only place left untouched was the vast expanse of the Pacific Ocean, where the last survivors were currently taking refuge. About 2 weeks ago, the American delegate reported, bringing up a star chart in midair, we began detecting dozens of black clusters forming along the outer rim of the solar system. They're growing at an alarming rate. Silence fell over the conference as each representative absorbed the implications. A new threat was gathering in the darkness beyond the planets, and no one yet knew how to stop it. They moved into position one by one, violating every known orbital path in the solar system. When the super satellite's cameras zoomed in, there was no doubt left. Those were spaceships. A hush fell over the command center. Ethan Mallory, standing at the front console, exchanged worried glances with the officers around him. "Is this the Tau T fleet?" he asked quietly. Admiral Park, the man with the hooked nose, turned to Ethan. "Yes. Every profile matches the vessels we saw on Blue Star. Grand Cross cruisers, battleships, and those floating gunboats. They've been laying waste to Blue Star for months now. With our current sensors, we can't get precise coordinates on individual ships." A technician brought the image up to full resolution. "From what we can tell, they've stopped advancing and are establishing a blockade. So far, we've counted over 300 warships." A low murmur of dread swept the room. Even if they could take down a single Grand Cross cruiser, past encounters showed our losses would be 100 to 1. Far too high a price to pay. A once proud nation now lies nearly penniless, and even the Haters Alliance has fractured. Yet reports of dozens of alien fleets massing beyond Blue Star's outer defenses have stirred a flicker of hope. Perhaps all is not yet lost. "Could they really be afraid of the Xiaongbing Company?" asked the Celestial Dynasty's envoy, brows knitted in disbelief. He could not fathom why anyone would go to such lengths, deploying entire fleets, establishing forward bases, out of simple dread of one mercenary outfit. Ducao shook his head. "No, according to the Tauti civilization's active scan logs, their fear is far greater. They tremble at the mere mention of Morgana, the Demon Queen, and her ruthless demon civilization, undeniably the greatest evil in known space. They're equally wary of the mysterious Krypton Empire, whose motives remain inscrutable, and the inscrutable legions of the angelic civilization. The envoy paled. After all, the Xiangbing Company had barely held its own in the Battle of Tianhe. Facing down several cross-class warships, they had fought to exhaustion, and only Delena's and Du Changwei's extraordinary powers kept their fleet from being utterly destroyed. Compared to those cosmic horrors, the company was no threat at all. Yet if even these conquerors of the void feared the Demon Queen and her ilk, perhaps Blue Star still had a chance to survive. The delegates from Blue Star didn't inspire much confidence. They depended on bullying tactics to keep the Tao Ti civilization's forces at bay. Yet when measured against the great fleets that patrol the galaxy, the Tao Ti ships massing on Blue Star were barely more than a raid. Even so, humanity could hardly withstand an assault of that size. If the full Tao Ti armada ever arrived, it would be a catastrophe. The emergency session broke up in haste. Representatives of the beautiful country pressed China once more to hand over the supergenetic Xiangbinglian technology. With the fate of humankind hanging in the balance, they argued, China had no right to withhold what could save billions. Beijing, however, remained unmoved, offering only a courteous refusal. One beautiful country delegate snorted as the video feed cut off. I never trusted the Chinese. They're hopelessly unreliable. He turned to his aides. Prepare our next move. Ethan stood at the head of the council table, the polished surface reflecting the holographic star chart that hovered above it. Around him, his advisors exchanged uneasy glances. Your Highness, began Admiral Rain, voice low but urgent. We must pledge ourselves to Queen Morgana. Her fleets are the strongest in known space. She can shield us and even promise us eternal life. Ethan rubbed his chin. What about the angelic civilization? Their power rivals Morgana's. The council's scholar, Lysandra, shook her head. They aren't the gods we've worshipped. In the so-called City of the Holy Lord, they abandoned the true God in favor of an angel queen. Yet not a single angelic guardian descended to protect them. Now that city lies in ruin, overrun by demons. A murmur ran through the room. Ethan's next question was softer. And the Kryptonian civilization, the legendary God King's domain? That's even more elusive, admitted Envoy Torin. We have no coordinates, no reliable signals. Their whereabouts remain a mystery. Ethan straightened, resolve hardening in his eyes. Very well. If Morgana is our only hope, then so be it. I pray the citizens of our great nation will understand why I must side with her. He turned to face the viewport, gazing at the distant swirl of nebula. Behind him, a quiet narration filled the chamber. Their beautiful country had never been a traditional state. It was a joint stock company masquerading as a sovereign nation, entrenched with mercenaries, driven by profit above all else. When Holy Kesha gifted them a floating island as their new capital, they cheered it as a triumph. Yet in truth, it offered no meaningful defense, no strategic advantage. Now, as the galactic balance of power shifted, Ethan knew their survival depended on more than fancy trappings. They needed alliances, and a vantage point from which to watch the rising empires of the stars. With one last look at his advisors, Ethan extended his hand. Send our envoy to Morgana. Let us secure our future. Silence fell, punctuated only by the soft hum of the star chart as it spun into motion. Hundreds of angelic guards and soldiers stood arrayed along the frontier, their sole purpose to keep a close watch on the Kryptonian civilization and snuff out any spark of rebellion. In the throne chamber of the Celestial Palace, Queen Kesha's voice rang out, sharp and commanding. Yan, Morgana has sent a demon warrior against Fraser. Go and eliminate it at once. Angel Yan bowed his head in acknowledgement. At once, Your Majesty. He knew exactly what Morgana's move implied. She was maneuvering against Anixid. Whether Morgana intended to kill him outright or simply use him as bait to draw the angel's fire remained unclear. Before Yan could question further, Queen Kesha issued a final warning. Be on your guard. Your target is none other than your old rival, the sword demon Atuo, Morgana's elite general and a third-generation warrior. Do not underestimate him. Yan's resolve hardened. The sword demon was infamous for his deadly skill with the blade. This would be no routine skirmish. He stood ready to take flight. Queen Kesha glanced at the empty stand where Jay Shaolun of the Galactic Fleet might have stood. She had deliberately left him behind. Recent intelligence from the Dark Plane revealed that Shaolun's feelings toward angels had soured into outright hatred and now harbored murderous intent against them. Better to face Morgana's demon alone than risk betrayal from within. Silently, Angel Yan unfurled his wings and soared into the sky, determined to confront Atuo and preserve the fragile peace the angels had long maintained. Chapter 102. Powerful Black Hole Engine. It hardly mattered in the end. For Holy Kesha, missing this chance to deepen its bond with Angel Yan was only a temporary setback. There would be plenty more opportunities ahead, and time was on their side. Ethan had already learned that Angel Yan was bound for the Fraser system. To buy time, they deliberately held back their greatest enforcer, the sword demon Atuo, allowing Angel Yan to press on unimpeded. Atuo would only make his appearance once Holy Kesha was forced offline. And even if a demon civilization's divine body were achieved, it offered no real advantage over Angel Yan. Perhaps it could open wormhole corridors more efficiently, but it stood no chance against her. At last, Ethan murmured, the moment we've been waiting for is at hand. Victory will soon be ours. Beyond this confrontation lay even greater challenges. Looming wars with the Triangle Civilization, the Sky Slag Legion, the Gluttonous Civilization, and the Giant Wolf Civilization, commanded by the death god Karl, among others. That was why Ethan had thrown himself into perfecting the Kryptonian god-killing power. Now that he fully understood its principles and technology, scaling up production would be only a matter of time, and then no divine being would be safe. Ethan had long ago realized he no longer needed a legendary artifact like the Promise Star to channel god-killing power. His latest vanguard, the Kryptonian soldiers clad in silver armor with gleaming wings, were each genetically engineered at the core with that same divine-slaying energy. Fueled by Ethan's super gene engine, they could unleash terrifying destruction even unarmed, their attacks owned specifically to fell deities. They were, in fact, his third-generation super warriors. The elite contingent in golden armor and wings underwent similar enhancements, transforming them into third-generation divine bodies. Alongside their innate god-killing capacity, they boasted the peak beast physique, the invincible body technique, and mastered deadly god-slaying martial arts. Meanwhile, the original 10 Noxian gods of war remained unchanged, an unshakable force on the battlefield. Beyond them, Ethan had engineered 2 new void warriors. Their engines ran on concentrated void matter, not quite as potent as pure void particles, but still surpassing even Howl's famed energy output. With the Holy Kesha campaign drawing to its climax, the Void Warriors could finally step out of the shadows and join the fray. In the outrageous realm of the Super Seminary, mastering black hole algorithms is the ultimate breakthrough, the very key to building a black hole engine. Ethan himself accomplished this feat. He pored over black hole dynamics, fed his data into a supercomputer, and wrote an algorithm much like those used to harness superhuman abilities. The challenge was immense. Even the most powerful celestial computers buckled under its complexity. Yet with his supercharged intellect, Ethan went from raw simulation to a finished algorithm in under 24 hours. Just as remarkable as Ethan's void engine, he's fully equipped it with an endless supply of void particles, so many that he can never run out. Even the deformed void particles, which normally demand astronomical energy to control, pose no problem. Ethan can recover more energy with a single breath than they can consume. The result is an engine whose performance borders on the supernatural. Unless Karl, the god of death, wields void technology that surpasses this, Ethan's black hole engine, blending Galaxy Power's anti-void capabilities, the Super Seminary's void engine sword techniques, and the Angel's secondary biological engine innovations, will stand unrivaled as the Super Seminary's crowning achievement. Ethan stared at the shimmering display before him, heart-pounding. This was the most powerful void engine ever built, a full 500-frequency, high-frequency black hole drive. Paired with his own biomass computer core and newly unlocked superbrain, its theoretical processing power was off the charts. In fact, the numbers themselves were impossible to calculate. Yet all this raw power meant nothing if he couldn't harness it. Humans had spent millennia devising ways to train and stretch the mind, mnemonics, logic puzzles, memory palaces. Ethan had dutifully tried every one of them, but his superbrain reduced each exercise to dust in microseconds, absorbing the pattern, then discarding it. No human method could even scratch its true potential. Not even Yeduidi, his most advanced AI colleague, had managed to make a dent. He took a deep breath and tapped the final command. Black hole engine, activate program. Instantly, the interface exploded with new modules and updates. Additional black hole drive algorithm, enhanced void controller, anti-void defense protocol, advanced void manipulation suite, super-defined matter generator, concept rewriter module, spatial redefinition matrix, gene rewrite definition system. The console's glow intensified, casting Ethan's face in cold blue light. Power pulsed down the line like a living thing. At last, the engine was online, humming with potential he had only just begun to imagine. He allowed himself a small smile. This was only the beginning. Now, he would discover how far his superbrain and the black hole engine could truly go. Ethan's vision rippled as the black hole drive algorithm kicked in, cycling through 6 escalating phases: simulated micro-black holes, miniature atomic singularities, mid-sized massive holes, full-scale supermassive voids, galaxy-level singularities, and finally the ultimate black hole incarnation. Instantly, he felt an unfathomable surge of power resonating through every cell. His body was already extraordinary, an infinitely adaptable vessel primed for cosmic forces. Yet the truncated versions of his Kryptonian and Doomsday genes imposed hard limits. In theory, acquiring the legendary Code of Life might fill in those genetic gaps and push him even further. But the code remained beyond reach, so Ethan had devoted himself instead to engineering this black hole engine. Supergene Definition Module, activated, the onboard AI announced in a calm, synthetic voice. A heads-up display scrolled diagnostic lines. Detecting target. Species, Kryptonian civilization lifeform. Classification, advanced 4th-generation divine shell. Gene pool detected. Doomsday supergene, legendary Super Saiyan supergene, mutated Kryptonian supergene, galaxy power supergene, Nox star Ares supergene. Begin gene structure analysis, the system prompted. Ethan closed his eyes, letting the algorithm interface with his neural core. Data streamed into his mind in fractal patterns, helixes folding, exotic proteins mapping out in crystalline precision. As the engine tore apart the target's genetic code, Ethan prepared to adapt and integrate whatever breakthroughs he could salvage. This was his chance to transcend the limits of his heritage and to confront whatever challenges lay ahead with the raw power of a miniature black hole at his command. Ethan stared at the hollow display in front of him. Lines of system messages scrolled past. The solution is extremely complex, requesting superbrain computing support. Support granted, initiating redefinition and rewrite of target supergene. Defining composite gene sequence, Doomsday supergene complete, Kryptonian supergene complete, Super Saiyan gene complete, merging all 3 into the Super Destroyer Kryptonian gene. Process initiated, progress 0.0001%. The number refused to climb. Ethan frowned. No way, is it actually stuck? He leaned closer, watching the fraction blink silently on the screen. Another moment passed, and it inched up to 0.002%. Although infinitesimal, it was still movement. A surge of power pulsed through his veins, making his limbs feel both weightless and impossibly strong. His body seemed to warp reality around him, subatomic forces bending to his will. He pressed a hand to the console, trying to steady both the machine's output and his own racing thoughts. This task was proving far more challenging than he'd anticipated. Even with the augmented computing power of his superbrain interface, progress was agonizingly slow. Ethan's mind raced through possible solutions. Unless we can build a more powerful void engine, he muttered, we're just burning time. The fusion project needed that next leap in raw processing power. Without it, the supergene rewrite might never reach completion. He straightened, determination blazing in his eyes. The progress bar might be crawling, but it was still moving. And as long as it did, he would keep pushing the boundaries of science and of his own potential until the new Super Destroyer Kryptonian gene was fully realized. Ethan knew that the galaxy's rarest and most powerful void technologies could only be tapped from its deepest reserves. assuming neither the Super Seminary nor the Shena civilization had already staked their claim. As for Death God Karl, he'd been kept under Holy Kesha's thumb for so long that he still lacked full mastery of the Great Clock. It was doubtful he possessed any cutting-edge void breakthroughs. That meant Ethan would have to blaze his own trail. Fortunately, his supercharged intellect wasn't shackled by the Great Clock's rigid processes, so he was more than capable of catching up to, and even outpacing, Karl. Meanwhile, Morgana, poised for action, could no longer restrain herself. With calculated precision, she unleashed her forces upon the Great Canyon. On the training deck of the fortress ship, Commander Ducal was drilling the heroic company's super soldiers when, in an instant, a single shot shattered the tense calm. The round found its mark, and Ducal's head exploded in a crimson spray, an abrupt, brutal reminder that Morgana's attack had begun. Chapter 1 of 3, the Prologue. Queen Morgana stood before the glowing holoscreen as Demon One saluted. "Your Majesty, we have slain the war madman Ducal," he announced. Frankly, he fell far too easily, more like a puppet in a play than a tyrant. Morgana's lips curled with irritation, but before she could answer, Tyrena's command crackled in her earpiece. Wormhole target locked, initiating radiation-free microsolar flare. A pinpoint burst of sunlight energy struck the swirling rift overhead. In an instant, demon warriors caught in its path were reduced to molten slag. Wormhole sealed, Tyrena confirmed. No chance of escape. Black Wind stepped forward, voice low and urgent. "Dylena remains uncontrollable. If we don't weaken her soon, she'll turn that power on us." With a deft motion, he activated a hidden protocol, an insidious mental implant code buried in her genetic signature. Morgana waved him back. "No, too unpredictable. Release Ge Xiaolun." At her order, Ge Xiaolun, a favored commander who had just witnessed General Ducao's final moments, wavered. Beside him, Du Changwei, the general's distraught daughter, reached out for comfort. Ge Xiaolun met her anxious gaze, then faltered as a strange haze clouded his mind. Above them, Dylena hovered like a warrior goddess. Through Ge Xiaolun's scrambled senses, she twisted into an arrogant celestial being, an angel of doom, poised to strike at the Grand Canyon itself. His heart thundered. "Silence!" he roared, slamming his palm against the ground. Anti-void energy crackled outward in a rippling dome, aimed directly at Dylena's suspended form. Soldiers around him stumbled back, startled by the unexpected barrier. Dylena's wings of pure light flickered as she braced against the force. In that tense moment, the stage was set. Morgana's gambit to control Dylena had begun, and Ge Xiaolun, caught between duty and deception, stood at its furious center. Dylena felt the dark energy inside her surge into chaos, as though an impossible paradox had ruptured the very code of her being. She let out an involuntary scream and plummeted from the sky, crashing onto the deck below. Seeing their chance, Black Wind and Morgana immediately completed their psychic seizure of Tyrena. "Blow up the Juxia and seize the wormhole," Morgana ordered. "Scatter the heroic company's super soldiers. Only when they're isolated can we pick them off one by one." All the gods craved genetic resources, and Morgana feared that God King Ethan would set his sights on her beloved Time Rose, Du Changwei. She planned to throw the world into confusion to protect her prize. "Make sure you broadcast everything," she reminded her minions. "The Queen won't tolerate a single scratch on my rose." "Yes, Your Majesty," the demons replied in unison, well aware of Morgana's devotion to Du Changwei. In a blink, a hulking fiend swooped down and snatched Du Changwei, known affectionately as Yukin, away. With Dylena fully under her control, Morgana unleashed a cataclysmic blast that split the Grand Canyon in two. Then she dispatched Dylena to a hidden rendezvous point, delivering her into the hands of the god of death, Karl. Morgana turned to Karl with a cold, triumphant smile. "This is your moment, Karl. Eliminate me and the sacred Kasana Bichi together, and you'll have secured our victory once and for all." "In that case, the known universe will be yours," Morgana purred at Karl, the god of death. "I will never submit to you, Liangbing." Karl's voice was low, defiant. "Suit yourself," Morgana replied coolly. "I've already dispatched Dylena, and Ethan has sworn not to interfere. Your only task is to keep Holy Kesha from moving or looking back." Karl nodded, though his confidence faltered. He retrieved the big skull, a void weapon forged from condensed void matter. In theory, the skull could imprison its victim and transport them instantly across any distance, far more efficient than unstable wormhole drives. In practice, however, this was the first time void technology had ever been used in the Eld. His real worry was Holy Kesha herself. A being of her power level would register any distortion in the void in microseconds. The moment she perceived the skull's pull, she could evade it. If she slipped through that narrow window, the entire operation would collapse. Yet, under Morgana's unblinking gaze, Carl set the big skull's controls, his fingers dancing over arcane runes. "I hope you're right," he murmured. "If she senses the rip in space and dodges." Morgana only smiled, a pale crescent in the darkness. Then we begin again. At her signal, Carl unleashed the big skull's power. A yawning void opened, shimmering between two realities. Holy Kesha, unaware, or perhaps unafraid, stood at its edge, her robes fluttering in the strange, silent wind of the void. Carl held his breath as the void's tendrils reached for her, hoping beyond hope that this time the skull would hold. Ethan stood silently as Holy Kesha's confidence filled the chamber. With no sign of void tech interference, and certainly no trace of death god Carl, she had every reason to believe her sacred vessel was invulnerable, even to Demon Number One's vast computing power. "You dare confront me head-on? You must be very confident," Kesha said, her voice both amused and wary, the instant Morgana flickered into being before her. Though the likelihood of an unexpected ally seemed slim, the High Priestess never took chances. She immediately swept through Morgana's aura, searching for any hidden anomalies. If this was truly one of Hexie's champions in disguise, Kesha would learn it now. Hexie herself hovered nearby in her true form, but her presence did little to ease Kesha's caution. Ever since refusing to integrate the sacred codex into her dark plane, Hexie's raw power had remained capped at roughly a fourth-generation monarch deity. Only after fully adjusting her heavenly framework system would she unleash her full might. Until then, she might as well have been a lesser god. Ethan watched the exchange, noting the flicker of unease cross Hexie's features. Whatever game was being played here, he knew it was only just beginning. Ethan never imagined he'd find himself aiding Morgana. Had Hexie's true form and Holy Kesha been here now, Carl, the god of death, would surely have called off this plan, and Morgana would have fled, never to return. Instead, Morgana stood before him with Gay Shalun at her side. His eyes were pitch black, his will clearly usurped. It wasn't surprising. Nightmares had forced him to relive this exact moment tens of thousands of times. He'd lost all sense of dream versus reality and believed this was just another illusion. Convinced of that, he had sworn fealty to the demons, and on a blood-streaked battlefield, butchered angels with a feral grin. Ethan clicked his tongue. Tsk, tsk, the devil really does know how to play. He glanced at Morgana. Even if Holy Kesha strips Jay Shalun of his angelic wings, it won't matter, because you've already grafted him a pair of infernal wings. Your little band has become meaningless. Chapter 7. No Turning Back. Is it too late to transfer my allegiance to another galactic power? Ethan gasped, blood bubbling at his lips. Saint Kesha regarded him coolly. With a single, graceful flick of her wrist, silver blades of distilled energy appeared in the rippling air around him. They shot forward in unison, piercing his armor and pinning him to the rocky ground. Once a galactic power had chosen her, she would not abandon that bond on a whim. Who could say whether the Nor civilization or the Super Seminary even had the means to forge her another? Ethan's torment turned to rage. Saint Kesha, you! His words broke into a strangled roar as the pain overwhelmed him. Saint Kesha's expression didn't shift. She closed her eyes, reached out with her will, and wove a tight seal over Ethan's mind. His struggles ceased, and he slumped into unconsciousness. "We still need Yan to return," she murmured, stepping closer to where Ethan lay motionless. Only he can purify the nightmare's corruption from Ethan's spar. Irrit, Morgana emerged from the shadows, fists clenched. "Damn you, Ethan," she hissed under her breath. The demoness had come to rely on him as her greatest ally. Together, they'd cut down dozens of angels. Now she watched helplessly as he was laid low. Saint Kesha offered no apology. Instead, she knelt beside Ethan and placed a hand over his chest, her fingers glowing faintly with healing light. In her mind, she summoned Yan across the stars. This ordeal would forge Ethan's will into something even stronger, whether he realized it or not. Above them, the shattered sky shimmered with distant galaxies, indifferent to the clash of loyalties and the forging of destinies below. Ethan watched in horror as his forces faltered beneath Morgana's onslaught. Desperation clenched his heart. If something didn't change, his entire army would be annihilated. Summoning every ounce of his will, he called forth his ultimate weapon, the dark silver archangel. In a blinding flash, the archangel descended from the heavens, its twin blades of moonlit steel cutting through Morgana's dark magic as though it were mist. One swing shattered her protective wards, the next sent her sprawling to her knees, her robes torn and her power crumbling around her. Ethan advanced across the ruined field, his sword raised for the final strike. Morgana, the sorceress who had brought so much suffering, lay at his mercy. But as he prepared to deliver the killing blow, he paused. This was their last encounter. After today, they would never face each other again. He steadied his breath, lowering his sword until its tip hovered just an inch from Morgana's throat. "This ends now," he said quietly. "No more bloodshed, no more vengeance." Morgana glared up at him, defiance flickering in her eyes even as pain weakened her body. Ethan's gaze softened. "Before it's over," he murmured, "tell me why. Why did you drive this war? Why sacrifice so many lives?" Silence fell, broken only by the gentle rustle of the dark silver archangel's wings as it stood guard. The two enemies, once bound by hatred, now found themselves on the same fragile threshold, searching for answers in the aftermath of battle. Chapter 1-4, Big Trouble. Morgana's voice crackled over the dark comm channel, panic rising in every word. "Damn it, Carl. If your grandson doesn't move now, I'm done for." "Consider it handled," Death God Carl replied coolly. "Just tell Holy Kesha not to look back." But Holy Kesha paused at his warning. Suspicion flickered in her eyes as she glanced over her shoulder, and in that instant, a colossal skull materialized behind her and swallowed her whole. "Carl." Her voice trailed off into silence. When consciousness returned, Holy Kesha found herself drifting beside a star on the brink of supernova. She turned to see Carl standing in the void. "You actually brought me here?" Carl shook his head. "Not brought, strictly speaking. I simply altered your coordinates in space." "So I'm still near the moon?" she asked, studying the distant satellite's pale glow. "Exactly." Carl folded his arms. "And as for Delana's flare, you should know the Pangen and the Liang civilization had a hand in triggering it." Far off, the star's light bathed Artemis, its emerald surface cracking and burning as it hurtled toward collapse. In that glowing chaos, Holy Kesha realized just how vast the danger had become. With a single lift of her blade, Queen Kesha could have ended Delena's threat and secured her own escape. Yet she hesitated. "Queen Kesha?" Carl, the god of death, called out, "Why don't you run?" Carl knew she had two clear options. First, she could strike down Delena, shattering the angel's righteous order and forcing the solar civilization into his schemes. Even so, Carl had prepared safeguards to trap her. Second, she could slip away through the void barrier. Its defenses were too weak to block her wormhole transport, but he'd anticipated that too. No matter which path she chose, escape was impossible. "Why should I run?" Kesha replied, her voice steady as she met his gaze. "I want to see how you intend to destroy my order of justice." Carl frowned. "Aren't you at all concerned about the future of Angelkind?" "I believe in my angels," Queen Kesha declared, her voice ringing with unshakable confidence. Ethan inclined his head slightly as he addressed Princess Hexie. "Your Highness, have you considered what would happen if Queen Kesha were truly gone? You'd be left dangerously alone." Princess Hexie's eyes flew open. "Impossible, Queen Kesha." She opened her mouth to protest, but a sudden ripple of divine energy pulsed through the hall. In an instant, Queen Kesha's radiant form blinked out of existence. Hexie staggered back, her face draining of color. This was more shocking than the fall of the Holy Left Guard Nolan in battle. She whirled on Ethan, suspicion and fear warring in her gaze. "You had a hand in this, didn't you, Your Majesty the God King?" Ethan smiled, calm and unfazed. "If I'd truly wished her gone, I could have done it myself, but I let circumstances decide." He studied Hexie quietly. "In any case, the matter is settled. I have other affairs to attend to. It would be wise for you to remain under watch." With that, Ethan rose and strode away. Hexie opened her mouth to call after him, but before a word would form, a cadre of war gods emerged. Clad in ebony armor and bearing vast black wings, they surrounded her like sentinels of doom. Their eyes, implacable, tracked her every move. Among them stood Ansu Yinwu, his gaze locked firmly on the trembling princess. Silence settled over the throne room as Hexie realized she was now a prisoner of her own uncertainty, and at the mercy of gods whose loyalties were as dark as their armor. He-She's heart thundered in her chest as she stared at the luminous figure floating before her. Even though Delena's fourth-generation divine vessel still stood unbroken, her presence alone was enough to cow the proud commander of the Celestial Vanguard. What everyone truly desired was the living essence of the sun itself, and that was exactly why Ethan had come. Several standard moons ago, Morgana had wielded Dylena's power to obliterate Holy Kesha, then unceremonious, Lai cast her back down to earth. Morgana's caution wasn't born of mercy, but of politics. She refused to cross Pangen, the unchallenged sovereign of the Liang civilization. In all the known universe, few dared provoke Pangen. He and his people possessed the terrifying ability to detonate stars and raise entire worlds in a single stroke. Yet until now, Delena's full might had remained sealed behind an intricate gene lock, one that only Pangen himself could open. He had granted temporary access at the fabled Tiandao Tower, but only to Morgana's champion, and only up to a point. Without Pangen's explicit blessing, not even the dread Demon No. 1 could unleash the goddess's supernova potential. Had Morgana pressed the issue, the Liang civilization would have barred Delena from ever departing their territories. Ethan's arrival changed everything. Riding a slanted current of temporal displacement, he materialized inside the Tiandao chamber before the gene lock interface even registered his presence. His augmented intellect, inherited from a galaxy's worth of archived consciousness, cracked the lock instantly. In a heartbeat, he downloaded the final fragment of Delena's solar essence. A blinding wave of golden light burst from Delena, bathing the chamber in warmth and power. The long-dormant energies of the sun goddess flooded back into her, and with them, the destiny Ethan had come to claim. She could only watch, pinned by awe and fear, as the true radiance of the sun stirred once more, now firmly under Ethan's command. Ethan watched the console's status bars flicker green and allowed himself a small, triumphant smile. Star Energy Drive, Star Drive, both the algorithms and the tech are complete. He didn't need to crack the last heavily encrypted step of the solar incarnation protocol. He already possessed the front-end technology. If he chose, he could finish the process whenever he wished. For now, his focus lay elsewhere. Below, Delena remained unconscious in orbit. With a few deft keystrokes, Ethan guided her capsule out of the system and into Earth's gravitational pull. Instantly, the dormant craft began its rapid descent toward the blue planet. Satisfied, Ethan warped back to his celestial palace. Inside the throne room, He-See, once under his strictest guard, bowed respectfully now that her confinement had been lifted. She folded her arms, curiosity and caution warring in her dark eyes. "Your Majesty the God King, what are your intentions?" Ethan leaned forward, his expression inscrutable. "If you could understand my plan already, I wouldn't have needed to go to all this trouble." His answer was cryptic, almost teasing, like a riddle whispered in the wind. Without another word, he dismissed her with a gentle nod. Reluctantly, He-She backed away. So many questions flooded her mind, but for the moment, she would have to wait. Outside, news of Holy Kesha's final proclamation was already rippling through the angelic realms, an omen, perhaps, of storms yet to come. Through the treasury of holy knowledge, a shadowy projection of Holy Kesha suddenly emerged in the dark plane, a realm that binds together all angelic domains. His voice, though faint, carried immense authority. "By my will, Angel Yan is hereby appointed Supreme Commander of our host and Protector of the Realms. Every angel and civilization under his charge must unite in unwavering support to elevate him as the next Angel King. Be warned, my essence grows fragile. Should I one day fall before our foes, our realm of justice will demand a new champion to reclaim what we've lost. To that end, Angel He-She must face his final trial. He-She, do you accept this charge?" He-She's temper flared before he could temper his words. "All right, you stubborn spirit. I accept. Now leave me be." No sooner had Holy Kesha's specter dissipated from the supreme heaven then she ordered his spatial interface system to link with the fallen angel's sacred core. The attempt failed instantly. Kesha's holy atoms lay silent, unreachable. She scowled at the readout. Oh, the death god Karl is involved. That explains it. Only he could tear down a powerhouse like Kesha. Surveying the chaos of his command center, she felt a cold knot of dread tighten in his chest. This is going to be far worse than I feared. Chapter 105, Dual Void Engines. The fall of Holy Kesha brought catastrophe to the lunar host. Angels stationed near the moon suffered devastating losses, and the demon civilization responded with vengeful fury. Cut off from the Sacred Knowledge Repository's network and stripped of its massive computational bonus, Angel Leng had no choice but to withdraw to Blue Star with her fellow angels. Surprisingly, the Kryptonians offered no resistance. Perhaps they figured Blue Star was already in chaos and saw no harm in letting more celestial refugees arrive. Despite fielding hundreds of angels, including scores of elite guardians, the retreat claimed only a dozen lives. Most of those casualties occurred during the coordinated assault by crocodile god Sodon and the demon Geishaolun. If Holy Kesha hadn't managed to shut down Geishaolun's mental processes at a critical moment, their losses would have been far higher. This outcome stemmed from the boldest alteration Ethan had introduced to the original timeline. He had quietly instructed Morgana to seize Geishaolun ahead of schedule, before they even subdued Du Changwei. To his astonishment, Morgana didn't merely capture her, she spliced demon gene fragments into Geishaolun's genome, deliberately corrupting her deepest genetic layers. Now, beneath her chaotic demon heritage lay a hidden strand of angelic DNA, an echo of celestial genes that stretched back tens of thousands of years. Ethan's wings were a relic of the angel civilization's earliest gene engineering. True angel wings, but not the rare time-space wings that allow interdimensional travel. Later, when the Angels' High Council completed its ultimate upgrade, they wiped out the old angel genome altogether and split their kind into two distinct races, the New Angels and the Scum of Heaven. Unbeknownst to them, the sliver of primordial angel DNA left in Ethan had already been inoculated with demonic strands. In effect, his core genome was now tainted by demon genes. Given Ethan's notoriously weak willpower, and the demonic genome's uncanny talent for igniting desire and emotion, this was hardly surprising. Morgana herself was aghast when she learned how obsessed he'd become with Du Changwei, and how he fantasized about winning the hearts of 10 school beauties. Yet she allowed him to chase those foolish cravings. The demon realm never launched a full-scale purge of the dozen fallen angels in their grasp. After all, demons can be resurrected, whereas angels cannot. Morgana's wrath fell solely on Holy Kesha. The other angels were left untouched. She didn't bother to look back. Even if a dozen angels threw themselves in Morgana's path, Morgana would have cut them down without a second thought. Her sole focus was getting back to mellow heaven. Everything else, even the fate of Galaxy Power's angelic civilization, could wait. Truth be told, she had her doubts. She might bear the title of king, but she didn't believe she could defend an entire civilization, especially after seeing what happened to the tomboy warrior. If even that fierce combatant had fallen, what hope did she have? Still, she wouldn't leave her peers utterly unprotected. With a flick of her will, she dispatched the clone combat puppet stationed on Blue Star to Angel Leng and the others. At least, they'd have some shield between them and whatever threats lay ahead. As she turned her thoughts to Ethan, she noted his composure. He'd remained unnervingly calm, almost as if he'd predicted the tomboy's destruction from the start. Ethan stepped into the core vault of Supreme Heaven, the sunlight supergene clutched in his palm. He'd come back not to celebrate victory, but to unravel the full potential of this astounding inheritance. Stellar energy drive algorithm, stellar propulsion matrix, he murmured, scrolling through line after line of code. Hasn't anyone in the Liang civilization updated this in 10,000 years? He paused, awestruck. The data went far beyond mere starship travel. Buried within the genomic blueprint were protocols for planetary climate to regulation, solar heat redistribution, even intricate models of stellar radiance control. Every element, every variable, had been laid out in meticulous detail. Ethan's mind raced. With these designs, he could not only pilot ships between the stars, but reshape entire worlds' environments, harness the sun's output with unprecedented precision, even stabilize dying stars. All of it lay waiting in the genetic algorithms of sunlight. His fingers flew over the console. Supreme Heaven's hollow projectors flickered to life, overlaying stellar maps and climate grids in midair. The future of galaxy power, perhaps of the entire galaxy, rested on what he would do next. And for the first time, Ethan felt more than just hope. He felt the weight of destiny igniting within him. From the beginning, the Sunlight Project was designed to expose the ultimate terror. When the forces of darkness no longer have matter or energy to draw upon, Delena will transform into a living sun and flood the world with light. Ethan hasn't yet resolved how to reconcile this with the laws of energy conservation and entropy, but he's already begun experimenting with direct stellar extraction. Reaching out, he tapped into the nearby Chiwu star system, and in an instant, a blazing sphere of pure light and searing heat appeared in his palm. Amazed, he realized, this eclipses even Dr. Octopus's thermonuclear fusion. This is a real star. His cells tensed as they ravenously absorbed the stellar energy. Although they had nearly maxed out their potential, the recent enhancements from the black hole engine had boosted their capacity. Now, gorging on the star's power, his cells momentarily tore themselves apart and then reformed, far stronger and more expansive, ready to contain the new influx. Fueled by the very essence of sunlight, Ethan understood that he was on the verge of mastering stellar compression, the art of condensing a star's brilliance into a tiny, controllable form inside his own body. It was this unrelenting obsession with the power of the sun's light that had driven him from the very start. Ethan studied the blue giant compressed energy cannon in the Black Operative's hands. Its principle wasn't unlike the weapons wielded by Kryptonians who tap into stellar radiation as a superpower. Here, however, that same radiation was amplified. Sunlight could be used not only to ignite stars, but with the help of advanced space compression technology to condense an entire star into a single focused beam. Once fully operational, this cannon would turn Ethan into a walking amplifier, its infinite stellar furnace feeding him a limitless supply of power. All of this, though, hinged on Angel Yan's recovery. In the original timeline, she had come perilously close to collapse after channeling her life force into Geishaolun's teleportation back to Earth. That sacrifice weakened her so severely that Sword Demon Atuo's fatal strike nearly claimed her life. Now that Geishaolun remains by her side, she never needed to expend that energy. And with the sub-biological engine finally ignited, elevating her body to true divine status, Angel Yan has enough power to fully mend the grievous wound left by Atuo's blade. Sword Demon Atuo no longer wields Geishaolun's Void Engine sword. He has instead fallen back on the legendary god-killing weapon. Yet even with her restored strength, Angel Yan still lacks the reserves to make the arduous journey back to angel civilization. She stands far stronger than before, but the long road home remains just out of reach. After passing his verdict, Angel Yan set course for Blue Star. He needed to find Delena and replenish his energy reserves. It's clear by now that angels lack any native method for restoring stellar energy. Their power drive depends entirely on the flame sword, and even that weapon has only a finite reserve. When Angel Leng and his companions defended the North Star, they nearly exhausted themselves completely. She may have studied under the Liang civilization, but she never solved the core issue of recharging stellar energy, wet, her because the technology is too bulky to install, too conspicuous in operation, or simply beyond the Angel's computational horsepower to calculate the Chiwu star system's complex stellar algorithms. Whatever the reason, it works in Ethan's favor. The sun's radiance has been purified into a super gene, Ethan muttered, and we now possess both the algorithm and the core engine. Why stop at a flame sword when we could build an entire stellar drive? He wasn't short on void particles, and a lone black hole engine no longer satisfied him. After all, there's nothing to prevent installing dual void engines, so why not go all the way? As long as I can withstand the strain, 2 void engines will suffice. But for a Kryptonian, a stellar engine is far superior. They can summon stars at will. In a truly desperate situation, you could simply forge a sun and turn the tide. If that's the case, then why not aim higher? With these two void engines, I could become both a god of black holes and a god of stars, if only they prove functional in other worlds. Chapter 106. The King is Pleased. The obliteration of Holy Kesa had unleashed Morgana's ruthless ambition, and yet she still trembled at the name of Ethan. This unpredictable god king, she feared, might one day turn his divine wrath on her. So Morgana melted into the shadows, content to plot from afar. Little did she realize that Ethan, preoccupied by graver crises, had no spare thought for her schemes. Word reached Ethan of Duke Ao's death and the utter ruin of Holy Kesa. Without a moment's hesitation, Panjen appeared on Blue Star, accompanied by the 4 legendary guardians of Liyang, all determined to pay homage to Empress Lena. Pay homage was hardly an accurate description. Panjen's true motive was to stake his claim. He intended to ensure no other power would dare covet his goddess or challenge her honor. To Panjen, every trial, no matter how cruel, served as divine discipline, shaping Lena's destiny for greater glory. In his eyes, indignities and hardship were but furnace and hammer forging the perfect deity. Ethan's approach, however, could not have been more different. The God King would never sanction suffering for his chosen one as a form of spiritual training. In the proud civilization of Liang, no monarch would dream of humiliating a subject to prove loyalty, let alone drive them to death. And so, as Panjen marshaled his forces around Blue Star's throne, the quiet tension between these two divine philosophies began to simmer, each convinced that his way was the path to true power, and that Empress Lena's fate would ultimately prove who held the truer crown. The Kryptonian civilization was legendary, powerful enough to bend even its own goddess to dance for the pleasure of its courtiers. As Ethan stood before Lena, he wondered if she might help him clear away the pretenders on the cosmic throne so that she could rightfully claim the title of Emperor Liyang. After all, the Kryptonians boasted 180 god-slaying techniques, power enough to rival Liyang itself. Lena stirred awake just then. Her super gene system flickered back to life, piecing together the terrible truth of her recent subjugation. The memory of being controlled sent a fresh wave of pain through her. She had no desire to return to the Liyang civilization, and the Xiangbing company was utterly closed to her. Stripped of any safe haven, she had drifted from star to star, reduced to a dark deity, fighting monsters wherever she could. "You look uncertain," Ethan said quietly. He'd guessed that the space principal would be hunting for Lena, so he'd tracked her down first. He took another step closer. "Tell me," he asked gently, "are you the God King of the Kryptonian civilization?" Lena's eyes narrowed. She still recalled the charged encounter between Ethan and Holy Kesa on the Grand Canyon. She had no wish to tangle with him, yet she dared not show fear. Steeling herself, she met his gaze, every muscle poised to respond to his next move. Even Karl, the god of death, needed Lena's power to trigger the star's supernova and obliterate the Holy Kesha. Without deploying the great chronometer to scatter its sacred atoms across the cosmos, the Holy Kesha would inevitably rise again. No wonder a being of her stature trembled before the weight of that responsibility. "Calm yourself," Ethan said gently. "I bear you no ill will. If you find yourself with no other refuge, the Kryptonian Empire would be honored to welcome you, O Empress of the Fierce Sun." Lena's eyes widened. You're offering me sanctuary with the Kryptonians." Ethan inclined his head. "Yes, you are free to join us." She hesitated. "I've just destroyed the Holy Kesha. Aren't you worried the angels will descend upon you for revenge?" Ethan's expression was steady, almost naive. "The angels have lost their Holy Kesha. What threat do they still pose to me?" His calm conviction gave her pause. She shook her head, conflicted. "I could never simply annex myself to another civilization, and your true aim is to harness the sun's light, isn't it?" Lena's voice was low, wary. "I assure you, I have no interest in solar energy." Ethan's gaze met hers, unwavering. "I ask only for your counsel and your presence. No power, no obligations beyond your own will." For a long moment, silence reigned as Lena weighed his offer. At last, she drew a slow breath and met his eyes. "All right, Ethan," she said, voice steady. "I will consider your proposition." Lena stared at Ethan in disbelief. "You're telling me there's a god who couldn't care less about the sunlight supergene?" Ethan smiled. "Because I have something better." He lifted his hand, and a tiny blazing star materialized above them, casting a warm glow over the clearing. Delena's eyes went wide. She took a step closer, her voice trembling. How is that even possible? That's a real stellar object. She looked up at Ethan, baffled. You actually made a star. Delena could hardly contain her astonishment. Not even the Liang civilization had pulled off such a feat. After centuries of stellar research, they'd learned to steer stars, tweak their fusion processes, even trigger supernova-scale detonations. Those were extraordinary accomplishments, but fabricating a new star from nothing, Ethan's achievement dwarfed them all. She swallowed, her earlier doubts vanishing. There was simply no contest. Anyone who'd abandoned the sunlight supergene had no idea how immense the gap in capability truly was. Ethan's gaze turned serious. If you want to understand what we can really do, you're welcome to join the Kryptonian civilization. Delena exhaled, the enormity of his offer sinking in, and with it, the realization that her world had just changed forever. Ethan leaned back, a faint, confident smile playing at his lips. I'll let you know once I reach a decision. Across the polished conference table, Delena's gaze narrowed. The prototype stellar engine had already demonstrated remarkable power, enough to give her pause, even though the device was nowhere near complete. Ethan knew he could deploy his magic to overwrite her thoughts, but Delena was no ordinary subject. As guardian of Liang's vast databanks, she could detect any tampering and simply restore herself, a self-reset that mirrored the old feud between Angel Yan and Morgana, who had each wiped the other from their networks, only to reappear once the link was reestablished. What worried Ethan even more was his suspicion that the Liang civilization possessed the means to resurrect Empress Lena. With enough dark matter readings, they could rebuild Lena's consciousness, free of any mystical constraints and stripped of her rightful title. In that moment, the true danger of the stellar engine became clear. It wasn't just a weapon, but a tool for rewriting reality itself. Why do you want me to join you? Delena asked, her voice steady but edged with doubt. Ethan's expression took on the cool polish of royalty. The king will be pleased with your alliance. Delena's heart tightened at the implication. To stand with Ethan was to side with a power that threatened her own empire, and yet to refuse was to risk his displeasure. After a long, silent moment, she lifted her chin and shook her head. I'm sorry, I cannot accept. Her refusal hung in the air like a challenge. Ethan's smile never faltered, but behind his calm eyes, the engines of his ambition spun ever faster. It doesn't matter. You're welcome to join us anytime. Ethan waited, a faint smile playing on his lips. He knew Delena wouldn't be won over by a few smooth words alone. He'd have to let the Tauti civilization make their move first, then he'd rescue her. That stubborn girl would be in his debt sooner or later. Delena opened her mouth, but no words came. Ethan's technology so far outclassed Sunlight's that a promise of supergenes held no appeal. And as for the Liang civilization's famed ability to spawn stars from nothing, mere parlor tricks beside Ethan's breakthroughs. A bold thought flickered through her mind. Maybe he wanted her for who she wore, not for her genes. She'd never been on the receiving end of that kind of attention. Panjen and the others valued her, true, but only because of what her DNA could do. Anyone with comparable abilities could win their praise. No one cared about her thoughts or feelings. Panjen always bragged he'd shield her for 1,000 years, covering up every mistake. But would he ever appreciate the real Delena? They decreed that Delena would only be allowed to deal with them in 1,000 years. Outraged by their condescension, she bristled. She was more than mature enough now and saw no need for centuries of additional growth. Yet the supreme leaders of the Liang civilization still treated her as if she were nothing more than a child. Chapter 17. Deception. What's your real goal, Ethan? Are you trying to oust Gishaolun as the galaxy's chief deity? Delena's voice was calm but curious. Everyone in the Super Seminary, the Angel civilization, and the Liang civilization knew that Gishaolun was destined to become the future galaxy's chief deity. Even Delena herself had accepted, if only on faith, that he wielded immense power. Panjen kept his own counsel, but he, too, felt that his patron goddess held the potential to shape the cosmos. The Liang civilization's investment spoke volumes. they'd poured vast quantities of rare ores and cultivation materials into Blue Star, all to train a legion of super soldiers. And in return, they asked only for the modest title of captain within the heroic corps. Beyond that, they dispatched their own chief deity and the Empress to play house among these would-be champions and emerging gods. On the surface, it resembled angelic venture capital, an infusion of resources in hopes of future returns. Yet once the Liang truly understood human bonds on Blue Star, they retooled their strategy around genuine relationships. The angels, by contrast, continued injecting influence through elaborate gambits and questionable deals, banking on the promise of a tomorrow they couldn't guarantee. Delana studied Ethan's unflinching gaze. "You're up against more than a title," she said quietly. "You're stepping into a cosmic power play, one where every ally, every resource, and every whispered contract could tip the balance. So tell me, Ethan, why risk it all?" Ethan folded his arms, staring into the hollow screen as the briefing continued. "Guardian angels live and die for one another," he said quietly. "They spend their entire existence fighting side by side and shielding each other's loved ones." He swiped through a star map. "Now, the Liang civilization believes the Tao Ti are plotting to seize Blue Star. Their own goddess sees this as the perfect chance to hone her powers and to curry favor with the future deities and super warriors she'll inevitably encounter." He paused. "If things go exceptionally well, they might even secure a foothold on Blue Star themselves." Delana frowned. "You mean they're aiming to carve up Blue Star?" she asked, incredulous. "Not exactly," Ethan replied. "It isn't raw territory they want, but the planet's unique genetic resources. That's why they've dubbed it a theocratic mission. Without the promise of those bioassets, there'd be no divine mandate to invade." Delana's eyes went wide. "But didn't you say Gei Shaolin joined the demon civilization? I thought that was impossible." Ethan met her gaze. "It's true. From what I'm hearing, Gei Shaolin swore allegiance to the demonic host." Delana shook her head, disbelief etched on her face. He's one of the galaxy's greatest defenders. Yes, he has his quirks. He gets nervous in a fight, has a certain obsession with Duchangwei's rear, and he once deserted rather than face an impossible battle. But he's also the living symbol of our Super Seminary. Why would the demons accept him? He made them an offer they couldn't refuse, Ethan said simply, or so the rumor goes. He tapped the console, and with him on their side, the demonic forces gain not only an invaluable champion, but a direct link to the genetic archives on Blue Star. Delana swallowed. "This changes everything." She straightened, determination hardening her features. "If Gei Shaolin truly has betrayed us, we need to act fast. Whatever his reasons, we can't let the demonic host lock down those resources." Ethan nodded. "Agreed. But first, we find out exactly what went down between him and the Demon Council. Then we decide. Rescue, recruitment, or containment." Delana exhaled sharply. "Understood. Let's move." As they turned away from the hollow screen, the fate of 3 civilizations and all of Blue Star's untapped wonders hung in the balance. Ethan's voice was low and tense. "When nightmares first struck, they came for you, and for Gei Shaolin as well. But Morga, Na didn't stop at fear. She invaded his mind, sowing wicked thoughts until he embraced his darkest desires. The devil gene has taken root in him. He's fallen, corrupted by his own blood, and the angel civilization will cast him aside as impure." Delana's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with dread. Ethan pressed on. If Holy Kesha were still alive, she could have purged his demonic lineage, sealed it away for 10,000 years if necessary. But Kesha was destroyed, and now the angels have no time or strength to spare. Under her rule, they were already besieged by enemies on every front. He looked away, pain flickering across his face. And what of the Deno civilization and the Super Seminary? Ducao's strange death may have opened a door for us, but Cheng Yaowen vanished without a trace, leaving only Du Changwei behind. They were scattered by demon forces, stranded here on Blue Star, surrounded by unfamiliar electromagnetic fields, alien atmospheres. Without knowing the local parameters, they can't even establish contact. They may have no idea that Gei Shaolin has become one of the damned. Silence settled over them. Delana's shoulders trembled. Though she tried to speak, no words came. The truth hung between them, heavy as a stone. After Ethan finished speaking, Delana buried her face in her hands. She hadn't imagined things could go so terribly wrong. The very deity destined to guard the future galaxy, the brightest hope of the three great god-making projects, had now fallen and become a demon. Guilt flooded her voice. "It's all my fault." Ethan gently lifted her chin. "No, Lena. None of this is your fault. Every calamity in this world springs from weakness. If Holy Kesha had been stronger, she wouldn't have been destroyed. If Ge Xiaolun had been stronger, he wouldn't have given in to darkness. If our civilization had been stronger, the demons never would have dared invade Blue Star." He placed both hands reassuringly on her shoulders. Delena's eyes widened, her shoulders trembling. Ethan's words were a deliberate comfort, carefully crafted to lift the weight of self-blame, and given Delena's tender heart and inexperience, his reassurance took root instantly. Ethan shook his head, concern etched in his features. "If you'd come into this unprepared," he began gently, "you never stood a chance against someone as powerful as Angel Yan." Lena stared back at him, bewilderment and self-doubt warring in her eyes. Although she'd been asleep and undergoing genetic adjustments since before she could remember, and technically was centuries old, her maturity level barely went beyond that of a teenager. Her mental defenses were almost non-existent. It wasn't for lack of training as a goddess or an empress, but she simply couldn't summon that strength all the time. Blinded by Ethan's sudden tenderness, she'd never stopped to consider it. "Are you saying none of this was my fault?" she whispered, voice trembling. Ethan's expression softened, but his next words hit harder than she expected. "You're partly to blame, Lena. The real problem is that you're not strong enough yet." Lena's heart sank. "That sounds harsh, but it's true," he insisted. "Remember what happened when Pan Gen and the others suppressed your gene lock and stripped away your authority? Morgana and her followers invaded your mind in an instant." He paused, letting her absorb it. "And if you hadn't unleashed every last drop of your solar gene power, the entire hero company would have been destroyed." Silence settled between them. Lena closed her eyes, recalling the helpless panic that had nearly consumed her. Ethan's words weren't an accusation, they were a challenge, and deep down she knew he was right. "No, Morgana wouldn't fear you, Karl the Death God wouldn't tremble, and even the angelic civilization wouldn't bow to your will. Yet here you are, arrogant enough to challenge me." Ethan's words cut through Delena's doubts like a blade. She'd convinced herself that unleashing a massive solar flare on Blue Star was too dangerous. The inevitable radiation fallout could wreak havoc on innocent lives. That argument had been her shield. Now it lay shattered at her feet. "Think it over, Rena," Ethan said softly, his eyes never leaving hers. "I have faith in you." Without another word, he turned and walked away, leaving Delena to wrestle with the unsettling truth he'd exposed. The seeds of uncertainty had been planted. When the Tauti civilization struck, and it would, she would recall this moment and watch her confidence collapse in an avalanche of second-guessing. Ethan paused at the edge of the council chamber, allowing himself a quiet sigh of relief. At least Chillin is safe, for now. He reviewed his options. Could he intervene in the unfolding crisis on Blue Star? Technically, yes, but the payoff wasn't worth the risk, at least not yet. He would wait, bide his time, and let events play out on his terms. With Ge Xiaolun's defection to the demon civilization, all hope for Blue Star was lost. Even if the Dinor Empire and the Super Seminary refused to surrender, they could only buy themselves a little more time before collapse. In truth, Ge Xiaolun's betrayal barely altered the war's outcome. He had risen to prominence only after inventing the Xiangjin Void Controller. Before that, Blue Star had clung to stability at any cost, sacrificing countless lives to keep the peace. Chapter 108, The Standoff. Ethan glared at Ge Xiaolun with thinly veiled contempt. A deserter by definition, Ge Xiaolun had never truly known the horrors of real combat, until now. Blue Star was in ruins, its defenses shattered, with no hope of retreat or reinforcement. While countless soldiers gave their lives to hold the line, what was Ge Xiaolun doing? Standing by his side, Morgana looked poised to assume command of the galaxy's remaining power, and Ethan couldn't deny that Xin Zhao might be the only one capable of shouldering such a burden. He scoffed at Liu Chuang's lofty rhetoric. Since when did gifting two of the galaxy's finest super genes to a single individual make one a hero? If anything, it was reckless. Ethan's mind raced through every possibility. Should he openly defy Geshaolun and Morgana? Warn them that Du Qiangwei's allegiance to the demon civilization was no mere rumor? Perhaps even challenge Geshaolun in front of everyone. Watch yourself, Geshaolun. This is exactly the kind of threat Du Qiangwei brings. But Ethan froze. He'd built his legend on being the unflinching champion of justice. No, the scourge of sin itself. Publicly accusing his allies would forever tarnish that reputation. Instead, he took a deep breath and did what he could. With steely resolve, he activated his comlink and sent an urgent burst of code to the isolated Black Wall outpost of the Deno Empire, praying his clandestine message would turn the tide before Blue Star's last defenders fell silent. Chief Ethan, we've got incoming signals from both the Liang civilization and the Kryptonian civilization. Ethan stood on the command balcony of the Black Wall base, watching the last embers of the Great Rift's destruction fade beneath the stars. The once shattered rift had been sealed, and now this forward outpost hummed with cautious optimism. Berthed nearby was the colossal Mangdangshan, an interstellar cruiser forged entirely from dark alloy, its bulk shadowed beneath the hangar lights. But without a power core, it lay silent, a dormant giant. Scattered around the base were the 88 suits of Sun Wukong patterned dark alloy armor, each one a masterpiece of alien metallurgy. Ethan's staff officers were already debating how to equip their ranks. If we redistribute even half of this dark alloy to frontline troops, one lieutenant argued, we'll field a black-armored brigade capable of shrugging off touty claws, giant wolf fangs, even the little devil's plasma blasts. Ordinary ballistics can kill them, but only if the wearer's armor holds. We've seen tanks ripped open by a single shot from those individual alien weapons. Ethan nodded. It was true. Without specially fortified armor, their casualty lists would be catastrophic. Dark alloy was the only material known to resist those blows. Lieutenant Zhang hesitated before delivering the next report. Sir, about these communications, we can only intercept them through dark channel encryption, but the blockade around Devil Station No. 1 is tighter than ever. Ethan's brow furrowed. Devil Station No. 1, a demonic fortress orbiting the fallen world, maintained a jamming field that crippled most long-range transmissions. Few could penetrate it. Who can still operate dark comms inside the blockade? He asked. Well, the devil himself, obviously, Zhang said grimly. Anyone with a celestial-grade transceiver, too, but the Deno civilization ships can't break through. They're cut off. Ethan let that sink in. On one side, the Night Order and their defunct star cruiser. On the other, two potential allies, Liang and Krypton, locked behind an impenetrable veil of interference. Yet he had to try. All right, Ethan said, turning to the holotable where the dark comm feed flickered. Open a secure channel. We'll negotiate with whoever's on the other end, and prepare our men. Arming them with dark alloy plates is top priority. Get the salvagers to strip what we need from Mangdangshan. I want every platoon in full armor within 3 rotations. Lieutenant Zhang saluted. Yes, Chief Itha, N. I'll begin immediately. As the lieutenant left to relay orders, Ethan let his gaze drift back to the silent cruiser. Somewhere out there, allies awaited contact, and behind Devil Station No. 1, an enemy armada watched their every move. With dark alloy in their hands and a fragile line of communication to distant civilizations, the tide of this interstellar war might finally, just maybe, begin to turn. Deno 3 is still out of reach, the Black Great Wall officer reported, but Morgana already moves freely through the Grand Gorge. Before she even teleported Demon 1, she hacked into Deno 3's database. You can imagine the gulf between us. Lian Feng's gaze sharpened. Since Duke Ao's death, she'd assumed direct command of the Deno civilization and the Super Seminary, and these days she felt buried under the weight of secrets he'd never shared. What did their message say? She asked. The officer took a breath. The Liang civilization demands we swear allegiance and join their ranks. In exchange, Pan Zhen himself will lead Liang's celestial soldiers and generals to wipe out every monster on Blue Star. Lian Feng's jaw tightened. General Du warned us not to trust Liang. At least the Tao-Ti civilization is honest about wanting our annihilation. They show their cards. Liang, by contrast, speaks one thing in public and hides another. Ethan watched the star charts ripple under the hollow projector's light as Lian Feng let out a frustrated sigh. They've always wanted to enslave us, Lianfeng said at last, rubbing his temples. They crave the feeling of absolute sovereignty, like gods playing with puppets. On paper, the Liang civilization's proposal looked generous. Their patrol fleets offered protection, their trade agreements promised prosperity, but Ethan and Dukao both knew better. Any power that could threaten even the Sun's civilization by razing an entire city wasn't interested in friendship, it wanted control. Ethan turned to the technician standing by the console. What about the Kryptonian records? You said they were still neutral in this conflict. The technician tapped the datapad. They are, at least officially, but their terms aren't much different. They want Blue Star to formally join the Kryptonian fold. In exchange, Kryptonia will dispatch its magical armaments and generals to clear every last monster off the planet. Ethan arched an eyebrow. So the Liang promised to protect us, and the Kryptonians promised to slaughter our demons. What's the real difference? Lianfeng leaned forward, voice low. Both the Liang and the Kryptonians see Blue Star as a resource to be claimed. Once we pledge allegiance, they'll keep us safe, but we'll be bound to serve their grand designs. We trade one kind of danger for another. Ethan studied the shimmering holograms of allied fleets and mythical beasts on the surface below. It sounds like we have no choice, he said softly. Either we accept someone else's protection and lose our freedom, or we fight alone and pray we survive. Silence fell over the briefing room, broken only by the faint hum of the projector. Around them, the fate of Blue Star hung in the balance, and with it, the hope of forging their own destiny. From the Dano civilizations and the Super Seminary's point of view, the choice was simple. Sacrifice hundreds of millions of lives in a crucible to forge a true god, then turn their backs on both the Liang and Kryptonian civilizations. In their eyes, such losses were a small price to pay. Ethan, now hailed as the God King, ordered a global transmission laying out the Kryptonian situation for all of humanity. The Supreme Heaven's channels were impregnable. No demonic force could intercept or block the signal. When Morgana learned of the broadcast, she spat a few curses and fell silent. If the Kryptonians truly embraced Blue Star, she'd have to find a new refuge elsewhere. She lacked both the appetite and the courage to stand up to Ethan directly. She'd even toyed with the idea of allying with Karl, the god of death, in a bid to overthrow the God King. Her faith in him was too fragile. After cleaning up the Holy Kesha disaster, Morgana had grown overconfident. If she really couldn't face the consequences, why not stay hidden? Unlike her own sister, who would gleefully hunt her across the stars, Ethan had never shown any desire to pursue her. Chapter 7. Before departing, Morgana insisted on taking Duchangwei with her. Word of the Kryptonian civilization's broadcast had reached Blue Star, and its people were electrified, desperate to join a society so advanced. Yet true authority lay only with those who could establish direct contact, a capability neither the Black Great Wall Base nor any Blue Star faction possessed. Ethan paid their excitement no mind. His goal was simply to shake the foundations of the Dinor civilization and the Super Seminary. Originally, Blue Star had no choice but to follow Dinor and the Super Seminary to whatever end they deemed fit. By sharing the Kryptonian transmission, Ethan had now given them a real alternative. Even as entire worlds debated their next move, his own focus never wavered from Qilin. His super-intelligent mind could multitask seamlessly. Clones handled every extraneous task, while the one true Ethan remained at Qilin's side, even during the perilous mission to locate Delina. Meanwhile, Juxia City teetered on the brink of collapse. Morgana's latest gambit, manipulating Delina into leveling Juxia and obliterating the South China Sea Fleet, had plunged the city into chaos. Fierce battles between angels and demons raged through its streets, turning proud spires to rubble and casting long shadows over what was once a beacon of hope. As smoke curled into the sky and the air thrummed with the clash of otherworldly forces, Ethan knew the greatest challenge still lay ahead. Chapter 5. The fall of Kesha High above the shattered highway, an ethereal figure hurtled toward the speeding convoy. Silver wings, once radiant, shredded against the wind as the angel plummeted, crashing onto the roof of a sleek black interceptor. Shards of glass and metal flew in every direction. Drivers slammed on the brakes, but before anyone could react, a hulking demon tore through the dust-choked air. Its claws closed around the angel's throat, and with a single, brutal motion, it snapped her neck. Her luminous form flickered and died in an instant. Ethan and Cheelin, riding just behind the wreck, braced as the demon pivoted toward them. They leapt from the car before it could strike again, sprinting for cover as the beast shrieked and charged. Around them, the world was unraveling. News had come that morning. Holy Kesha, the island fortress that once guarded Blue Star's eastern flank, had fallen. The great spires lay in ruins, their defensive wards shattered by an unknown force. Even the distant Kryptonian civilization, long the galaxy's sentinel, had looked away, unwilling to entangle itself in what they called the petty struggles of a backwater star. With Kesha gone, the might of the Celestial Empire collapsed overnight. Communication towers burned, radar arrays went silent, and the Imperial garrisons, cut off from command, simply ceased to function. From every ruined port and scorched coastline, demons poured onto Blue Star. Small demonic scouts swarmed the coastal archipelagos. Larger battalions descended on border fortresses, tearing down barricades with inhuman ferocity. With the comms grid destroyed, artillery batteries lost their targeting locks, and infantry units stood helpless as wave after wave of hellspawn overwhelmed their lines. What had once been a tenuous defense buckled and broke. In the midst of this chaos, Ethan hefted his improvised spear, nothing more than a metal rod tipped with jagged scrap. Yet, when the nearest demon lunged, he met its charge head-on. He drove the shaft through the creature's armored hide, then twisted free, sending it crashing backward in a spray of black ichor. He did it again and again, each strike precise, as though guided by some hidden hand. Cheelin skidded to his side, panting. You're an ordinary citizen, she gasped. How are you doing this? Ethan didn't answer. His eyes were fixed on the horizon, where plumes of smoke marked the next battleground. We have to keep moving, he said at last. There's still a way to turn this around. Behind them, the demon horde surged, but for the first time since the fall of Kesha, Keelan dared to hope that all was not lost. With Ethan at her side, and whatever secret strength he carried, perhaps they could still stand between Blue Star and utter annihilation. Chapter 109, A Relationship of Necessity. On the surface, Ethan's situation might have looked a lot like Liang Bing's, staying close to Du Changwei and playing along, but in every meaningful way, Ethan was nothing like him. Liang Bing had assassinated his own father, laid waste to the Grand Canyon, even annihilated Blue Star, leaving untold casualties in his wake, and yet he remained by Du Changwei's side as if his sins were nothing. Ethan had done none of those things. The worst he'd ever done was stand aside when he might have intervened, and, in his mind, he wasn't even a native of Blue Star, so he felt no guilt weighing down his conscience. From the moment they'd slipped away, Ethan had kept Cheelin moving steadily in the opposite direction of the Xiangbing Corporation's sphere of influence. His foremost concern was to keep her safe, to make certain she never fell into the clutches of the Dino civilization. They skirted abandoned mining towns and followed winding mountain passes, always on the move, always watching the horizon for any sign of pursuit. Ethan's plan was simple. When the Kryptonian civilization finally arrived as promised, he would choose a city at random. There, he and Cheelin would register as survivors and come under Kryptonian protection. Only then would he allow himself a moment's rest and the freedom to pursue whatever came next without looking over his shoulder. Cheelin, for her part, remained consumed by worry over her parents. Under the present circumstances, though, there was nothing they could do but guard their own lives as best they could. So they pressed on together, two strangers bound by necessity, hoping that the next sunrise would bring them one step closer to safety. Ethan had one pressing concern. If Cheelin ever discovered her true identity and learned that he hadn't done anything to save her parents, she'd never forgive him. To head off that guilt and resentment, he quietly assigned a small cadre of trusted agents to watch over her mother and father. From everything he'd heard, Cheelin's father was as courageous as his daughter, truly a family trait. Ethan half expected that the moment Cheelin's growing power let her attempt a rescue, her elderly father would follow suit and put himself in harm's way. Fortunately, two legendary godslayers now stood guard over him. Without their protection, he might not have survived this long. Meanwhile, Morgana seethed with irritation at Gei Xiaolun's constant pestering. Day after day, he badgered her to welcome Du Changwei into the ranks of the demon civilization. Logically, of course, Du Changwei had sworn fealty first and Xiaolun only afterward, but Xiaolun's desires had long since drowned out any coherent train of thought. He was convinced that inducting Du Changwei would strengthen their cause, arguing that only the unified might of the demon civilization could shield Blue Star from the looming invasions of the Tao Ti and angelic realms. Begrudgingly, Morgana realized there was little point in arguing. If it brought them closer to defending Earth, so be it. Ethan frowned. Morgana's grand invitation to Du Changwei meant nothing. She couldn't guarantee Du Changwei's loyalty. All he could do was keep Gei Xiaolun placated and wait for a chance to get close to Du Changwei himself. He'd already planned a contingency. If everything unraveled, he'd capture Du Changwei outright and spend centuries, no millennia, breaking her resolve. He refused to believe she was unbreakable. And so Du Changwei slipped completely off Morgana's radar for months. Angel Yan, having failed in his search for Delena, turned his efforts toward finding Du Changwei instead. Ethan was certain Morgana hadn't backed down. It simply meant she still didn't know where Du Changwei was hiding. In the original tale, Demon Number 1 had needed ages to pinpoint her. Then Angel Yan himself flew back to Earth and located her. He'd been dead so long that grass had overtaken the barren wasteland where he fell, transforming it into a lush meadow, and it was there, amid the new growth, that he was resurrected. Considering how unreliable the time estimates are between Fraser and Earth, Ethan figures the trip will take at least 6 months, and possibly up to a year. In the meantime, Du Changwei has kept up regular contact with the Black Great Wall base. It almost sounds absurd. By dawn, he's tearing off on his motorcycle, touching down at the base by midday, then roaring back in time to meet the Yellowstone City convoy before nightfall. No normal rider could manage that, unless the base were secretly tailing them, or he survived on little more than trail mix and pure stubbornness. Ethan gave up on trying to explain it. The original briefing, even his mother's copy, had vanished long ago, and with no strict plot to follow, there was nothing left to worry over. If you've got the strength, you might as well be willful. Better to focus on rescuing a few people in distress, and maybe earn yourself a couple of fervent pledges of loyalty, than to sit back and do nothing. In truth, Du Changwei had grown used to this nomadic life over the past few months, darting between scattered survivors, reinforcing makeshift defenses, always racing the next demon attack. What had changed was the scale of the assault. The Empire's once impenetrable wall of defense had collapsed under the relentless tide of little devils, shrinking their safe zone to a razor-thin line. And now, every hour counted. Yellowstone City wasn't the only place thrown into chaos. The Angels of the North Star sector had been caught in the same cataclysm. Angel Leng, desperate to save whoever she could, had shepherded the surviving angels into hiding, praying for word from their civilization. She had no way to reach Gei Xiaolun or any other ally. Du Changwei was on her own. While scavenging for supplies amid the ruined streets, Du Changwei froze. A lone man strolled calmly through the silent city, and behind him, a handful of impish little demons materialized from the shadows. Alarm bells rang in her mind. Danger, she thought. With a sharp gesture, she opened a wormhole and summoned her black armor around her. Energy flared as she launched herself at the demons, ready to strike. Then, effortlessly, the stranger raised his hand. The little devils screeched once, then crumbled into ashes. Du Changwei stood in stunned silence. The devastation around her faded into the background as all her attention zeroed in on the man before her. "Who are you?" she demanded, voice trembling between awe and fury. Recognition flickered in her eyes. It was him, the same warrior who, just months ago above Juxia, had stood toe-to-toe with the God King himself. His gaze met hers steadily. "It's been a while, Du Changwei," he said, and for a moment the world felt as though it held its breath. Then he added quietly, "Call me Ethan." Several months ago, the Kryptonian civilization broadcast its offer across the galaxy. If Blue Star would pledge allegiance to them, they would guarantee its safety. When Du Changwei first saw Ethan, once known to her only by reputation, she instantly let her guard fall. Deep down, she knew she stood no chance against him. His wealth-fueled strategies alone dwarfed anything she could muster, and his command of wormhole transportation rendered her most advanced technologies obsolete. She had heard the whispers about the relics he'd lost over the years, a godslayer blade capable of sundering deities, the legendary flaming weapon, and that mysterious dark silver armament even the Denor civilization couldn't identify. It wasn't until she combed through the Super God Academy's archives that she discovered the true nature of that last weapon. Compared to those treasures, her dark alloy throwing knives were child's play. Bitten by a mixture of awe and restrained excitement, Du Changwei managed a bow. "God King, Your Majesty, what brings you here?" Ethan regarded her with cool detachment. He didn't need telepathy to read her thoughts, her quickened pulse, the calculations spinning behind her eyes. The power dynamics between them had shifted irrevocably, and she knew it as surely as he did. This was far too transparent, Ethan thought with a faint smile. "Let me guess, you're the Time and Space Rose super soldier, aren't you?" His tone was casual, devoid of the awe-inspiring presence she'd heard about. Du Changwei stared at him in disbelief. She'd never expected someone of Ethan's legendary status to show up here, of all places. For a moment she couldn't speak. Finally she managed, "Yes, I am." The words slipped out before she fully registered them. And almost at once her thoughts fell into step with Ethan's, as though he were guiding the conversation from behind her mind. To him, it was surprisingly easy. Of course, steering her thoughts this way didn't guarantee she'd agree to anything he might ask, but it was a start. Chapter 110. Everyone's Struggle. Du Changwei took a steadying breath and forced herself to focus. The moment Ethan appeared, her first instinct had been to try and bind him. After all, his immense power and the Kryptonian civilization's recent broadcast of goodwill toward Blue Star had led her to believe they were natural allies. In her mind, with the backing of the Kryptonians, Blue Star could effortlessly overcome the threats of both the Tau-T and the demon civilizations. That assumption had colored her every thought and action. But as their conversation unfolded, Du Changwei's confidence began to waver. Ethan's cool, unflappable manner made it clear that the favors she dangled meant nothing to him. Securing the God King's power would be far more complicated than she'd imagined. What could Blue Star possibly offer that would interest a being of his stature? Sensing her growing uncertainty, Ethan regarded her with mild amusement. He knew her type well, ambitious, quick to judge, and always looking for leverage. His appearance here wasn't driven by urgency, but by a desire to leave an impression that would linger in her mind long after he was gone. Du Changwei felt trapped. She'd been forced to bend the Demon Queen to her will in order to defend Blue Star, and with the Kryptonian civilization poised to join the fray, there was little chance she'd ever fall under the Demon Realm's sway. Yet the weight of what she'd done left her restless and unsure of her next move. After pacing the corridors of the Black Great Wall base, she resolved to seek advice from someone she trusted above all, her mentor, Aunt Lianfeng. She found Lianfeng studying star charts in the command room. "Aunt Lianfeng," Du Changwei began, her voice tight with worry, "something incredible just happened. God King Ethan appeared before me, alone." Lianfeng looked up, frowning. "God King Ethan? By himself?" She set her charts aside. "That's troubling." In all her years at the Great Wall, she'd never imagined the legendary ruler of the ethereal realms would deign to visit any of them personally. Du Changwei nodded, swallowing hard. "He just showed up, no warning, but I'm certain he wasn't there for me." Lianfeng leaned back in her chair, studying her apprentice's face. "If he's truly taken an interest in your position, then something far bigger is at play. Ethan's not one to meddle in mortal affairs without cause." Du Changwei hesitated, torn between relief and alarm. "I don't understand it either. I know what the Time and Space Rose can do. Its power drew him here. But no one else does. Not even Archangel Yan believed I had any link to it. To her, I was just another second-generation warrior, one who couldn't even hope to live 1,000 years. 1,000 years, Lianfeng repeated softly. "Yes, and yet here we stand. There's more to you, and to that rose, than you've ever realized." She folded her hands, resolve hardening in her eyes. "We'll get to the bottom of this. First, we need to find out exactly why Ethan showed up and what he truly wants." Du Changwei exhaled, a spark of determination igniting within her. Whatever lay ahead, she wouldn't face it alone. With Aunt Lianfeng at her side, she might just find a way to turn even the God King's mysterious arrival to Blue Star's advantage. Lianfeng felt much as Du Changwei did. She wanted to turn to Ethan for help, but as a loyalist to the authorities, she soon realized there was nothing she or anyone could do to impress the legendary God King. "This is way beyond our reach," she muttered. He was like a mountain of gold in broad daylight, impossible to ignore, impossible to conquer, especially after his duel with the Holy Kesha, which countless witnesses had observed. Even the Liang civilization knew of his exploits through Delena's background files and the records Mao Shen kept of their journey to Earth. By all accounts, God King Ethan stood at least on equal footing with the Holy Kesha. Now that the Holy Kesha lay destroyed, the fate of the entire galaxy seemed to hinge on his mood. If Ethan chose to unleash enough power to wipe out star systems, he would instantly become the unquestioned ruler of the known universe. Yet such a display would be unnecessary and unwise, since it would only breed terror and provoke every other force to unite against him, just as they had done in the days of the Holy Kesha. Although I'm confident I'm unbeatable now, not even the Carl Company, the power behind Death God Carl, could stand against me. That assurance only holds as long as no one is dissecting my abilities. If my still mysterious void power ever comes under systematic study, who knows how far they could push it? After all, I already depend on void energy to repair and enhance my own genes. In that regard, the Super Seminary's research is simply astonishing. It's only natural that Du Chengwei would crave that kind of power. I know full well that if I offered her the slightest advantage, she couldn't resist. Du Chengwei wouldn't hesitate to sacrifice herself for Blue Star. She and Qilin are opposites, yet they share a willingness to give everything. Qilin's self-sacrifice hinges on her capabilities. She believes that with greater power comes greater responsibility, and I refuse to grant her anything beyond her means. But with Du Chengwei, it's different. I don't share the same feelings for her that I do for Qilin, so I don't mind empowering Du Chengwei at the right price. Du Chengwei pressed a hand to her temple, her brow furrowed. "I agree," she said, the headache in her voice unmistakable. "According to what you told me, the God King already thinks highly of you. Perhaps we can use you as our intermediary." Lianfeng could never match Du Cao's boldness, so she instinctively sought out a powerful patron. In theory, the super gene would eventually safeguard Blue Star, but the greatest galactic force has now rebelled and turned demonic. No one else suspects it yet, but Lianfeng knows the truth. She's terrified to speak up, because if Blue Star ever learned what had happened, its resolve would shatter. All she can do is pray that Du Chengwei can reclaim Ge Xiaolun's loyalty, and then find a way to purge the demon gene infecting him. Morgana's plan, however, has succeeded beyond anyone's wildest expectations. Perhaps she only meant to sully the angel gene, but she never counted on how deeply Ge Xiaolun's devotion to Du Chengwei is rooted in that angelic essence. He idolizes Du Chengwei so completely that even Angel Yan has conceded, waiting patiently for Du Chengwei to age and pass away. And now, with Morgana's corruption complete, that once pure angel gene has been twisted into something demonic. Ethan stared out at the sprawling council chambers of the angel civilization, weighing his chances. Even if he could purge every trace of demon gene from his system, there was no guarantee the angels would ever accept him or his newfound power. From the moment he'd first arrived, she, and Archangel Kesha had eyed him with suspicion. He wasn't one of the galaxy forces born with angelic blood. He hadn't even copied a scrap of their DNA. The original angel genome and the experimental strain that she had engineered were so divergent as to be almost alien to one another. Angels didn't bow to power alone. They required power rooted in their own sacred lineage. Still, the angel civilization was a shadow of its former glory. The days when Archangel Kesha's word was absolute were long past, and their once mighty empire now teetered on the brink of collapse. Faced with an existential threat, the Council had little choice but to consider every weapon at their disposal, even one wielded by a former demon. As it stood, two galaxy forces were openly recognized, the dreaded Demon Gene Battalion and Ethan himself, the so-called God King, who had cracked the original galaxy force and replicated its core. Rumors swirled that the Kryptonians possessed the means to mass-produce his version of the force. No one doubted their capability. The only question that remained was whether the angels would ever embrace this new champion born of both light and darkness. Ethan studied the tactical holoprojection, frowning at the numbers. The Dunor civilization is so strapped for resources they can only supply 2 supergene operatives to the galaxy force. If Krypton threw its weight in, they could boost that to 100 without breaking a sweat. So where does that leave the angelic civilization? Are they going to resort to arranged marriages with the Kryptonians next? Chapter 111, Return to Marvel. This is really a mess, Ethan muttered, watching Angel Yan descend before him. She looked far less pitiful than she had in the original timeline. Her condition had improved, but only marginally. Although she no longer needed to drain her own power to send Geshalun back to Earth, she'd also lost Delena's supplementary energy. Before forging her divine form, Yan had briefly shared that stellar power. Now, stripped of it, she clung to the remnants of her third-generation vessel. Technically divine, yet starved of energy, it was only a pseudo-divine body, like Sumali's third-generation avatar, which couldn't access the galaxy's genetic might. Du Changwei, Yan whispered, relief flooding her features when she spotted her ally. But that relief froze as her gaze shifted to Ethan standing at Du Changwei's side. Her eyes went wide. God King, Ethan, galaxy power, she stammered. Yan had never imagined seeing such a supreme being here. Why would one of the universe's most powerful deities appear in this place? Angel? Du Changwei peered up at the God King Ethan. At first, she thought this angel might be summoning Ethan himself. Then she realized the soft echo had been calling her name. Are you looking for me, or someone else? Angel Yan hesitated. She had intended to track down Du Changwei, and through her, locate Delena. Only Delena could renew the angelic body's waning divine energy. Although Angel Yan knew that she, the avatar of the Tianji King, walked the earth, she dared not approach her directly. The Tianji King's motives were inscrutable, and the new generation of angels had only fragments of her legend. Since the king's retirement, Holy Kesha had been purging the lingering influence of her old demons, including Angel Yan's own secret role in freeing Sumali. The throne of angels was too sacred to risk on a gamble. Angel Yan swallowed, steadying herself. She could scarcely afford the consequences of misreading a single motive, least of all those of the Tianji King. And truth be told, she knew she lacked the temperament to rule. Yet here she stood, summoned by the faintest beckoning, and faced with a choice that could reshape the future of all angelkind. It's entirely possible that Queen Kesha never intended Angel Yan to inherit the throne. After all, Pan Zhen's schemes had enraged she so badly that she refused to unlock the Queen's sacred archives and armory for her. Technically, Angel Yan's genes contained the heritage of the Liang civilization, but she cared nothing for dynastic titles. In her mind, Enixid was the true future king. She would gladly abandon all courtly affairs to serve Fraser as Enixid's personal bodyguard. A monarch might make a poor warrior, but Angel Yan excelled whenever her blade was drawn. Angel Yan stepped closer to Du Changwei. I'm looking for Reyna, she said in a low voice. She wouldn't dare reach out to Ethan directly, not while the angel civilization's most guarded secrets, the data keys to the sacred knowledge vault and weapons cache that Queen Kesha had entrusted to her, lay encoded in her memory. As soon as her divine form regained enough energy, she could jack in and access them instantly. If Ethan detected her signature on the network, she'd be branded a traitor to her people. Du Changwei regarded her coolly. She's not here. His attitude toward angels was lukewarm at best. Too many of them, he'd learned, had a knack for causing more problems than they solved. At present, Earth, known here as the Blue Star, maintains only the most tenuous ties with the angelic civilization. Under Du Changwei's leadership, humanity regards angels only marginally more favorably than demons. Many believe the demons appeared only because the angels provoked them, and that if the angelic civilization hadn't cordoned the demons in place, they would have departed long ago. It's a widely held view, and there are even those on Earth who have defected to the demons. Angel Yan still longs to leave, but cannot locate Delena on her own. In her desperation, she turns to the dark alloy black armor of the Shangbinglian, relying on its mutual positioning system to track Delina's wanderings across the realms. Ethan, however, pays her no mind. He merely dropped by to make an appearance and then departed to attend to other matters. I suspect Angel Yan will one day rue her decision not to enlist his help. Convinced that events on this world must be allowed to unfold naturally, Ethan temporarily withdraws from the Super Seminary realm. His next goal is to test whether both the Star Engine and the Black Hole Engine still function properly within the Marvel and Dragon Ball universes. The Star Engine is already fully operational, no small feat, given its complexity, so he now turns his attention to the Black Hole Engine. Ethan stepped into his office, and the lights brightened to welcome him. Almost immediately, a familiar voice crackled through the overhead speakers. "Boss, welcome back." "Jing Pochin," Ethan said, easing into his chair. "Begin the data upload." "On it," the AI replied. Within seconds, terabytes of new schematics and research findings began streaming onto his console. Everything from a ground-up blueprint for a black hole engine to refined designs for a stellar engine and 2 void engine prototypes boasting computing power measured in the thousands of exaflops. Even more remarkable were the advanced genetic engineering protocols the stellar engine could accelerate, critical steps toward perfecting the black hole engine's biotechnical core. When the transfer completed, Jing Podian's tone crackled with amazement. Stellar engine, black hole engine, void engines, supergene modifications, and the celestial supercomputer architecture. Boss, these are breakthroughs harvested straight from the Demon Number 1 archives and Dinor No 3's fragments. You've really outdone yourself. Ethan leaned back, eyes on the scrolling data. Demon Number 1 had provided the original neural adaptive kernel for the celestial supercomputer. Dinor No 3's code filled in the missing structural framework. Together, they formed the blueprint for an AI evolution he'd only dared imagine. "Status report on recent developments," he said, glancing at the chronometer glowing on his wrist. It was late, just the right time to mobilize the lab teams. "I'll run the first wave of simulations immediately," Jing Pochin answered. "Shall I dedicate more quantum cores to the celestial supercomputer?" "Double the allocation," Ethan replied. "Then notify R&D. Phase 2 begins tonight. I want full integration of the Void Engine processors with the Supergene sequencer by dawn." "Understood, boss." Simulation queues are building now. Ethan allowed himself a small, satisfied smile. With this arsenal of engines and experimental protocols, the next stage of his research would shatter every ceiling the galaxy had ever known. Chapter 7. Ethan stepped into the command center and paused, noting the discrepancy on the temporal displays. The date here was out of sync with the Super Theological Seminary's logs, off by roughly a third. In other words, a significant span of time had slipped by since he'd departed. "Sir, here's everything that's happened in your absence," Galvatron announced. With a gesture, he summoned a flurry of holographic images and data streams. Ethan's mind, honed for parallel processing, absorbed it all without hesitation. The first scene laid itself out in vivid detail, a coordinated, large-scale terrorist assault unlike anything the world had seen. Back when Ethan left on his mission, he'd entrusted Galvatron with 10 bioengineered subjects, artificial humans, each crafted with a distinct power set and silhouette. Some designs leaned heavily on the mythology of Gotham's underworld, an enigma-obsessed mastermind in a bowler hat, a nod to the Riddler, a gaunt, fear-harvesting figure clothed in tattered burlap, recalling the Scarecrow, and others drawn from the city's rogue gallery. Ethan hadn't aimed to create radioactive mutants or cosmic demigods, only a cadre of supercriminals capable of striking terror and challenging the world's heroes. The results were immediate and spectacular. Stark, bloody headlines followed every strike. SHIELD agents swarmed in to investigate bombed-out train stations, hijacked research labs, and hijacked airliners. Each attack grew more daring than the last, pushing global security to the brink and forcing Marvel's brightest champions into reactive mode. Ethan watched the data cascade across his visor, satisfaction flickering in his eyes. His gambit, to introduce a new class of villains and watch the world scramble, was unfolding exactly as he'd planned. "Good," he murmured. "Let them chase shadows while we prepare our next move." Behind him, Galvatron's holograms flickered, already compiling the reports on Incident 2. The game had only just begun. Best of all, the supervillains proudly declared the return of Hydra. Cut off one head and 2 more will grow back. Hail Hydra! Needless to say, Snake and S.H.I.E.L.D. felt their hearts pounding in their chests. Chapter 112. Pierce. In short, it was explosive. Alexander Pierce's heart didn't just race, it went nuclear. "What the hell is happening?" he barked at the bald man standing across the desk. He still couldn't believe the chain of events that had led them here. Not long ago, Nick Fury had strode into Pierce's office, his expression dead serious. Without preamble, he'd announced, "Hydra has risen again." Pierce's first panicked impulse had been to draw his sidearm and put a bullet in Fury and flee. Thank goodness he hadn't. Age had slowed his reflexes enough to keep him from acting on instinct. Fury wasted no time on excuses. He laid it out plainly. The recent series of horrifying superpowered attacks, they were all Hydra's doing. Pierce exhaled in equal parts relief and dread. Relief that his own covert affiliations hadn't been exposed, dread for the implications of Hydra's comeback. Fury then handed him a data drive. The footage it contained left no room for doubt. A masked figure emerged on screen, declaring himself a disciple of the Red Skull, vowed to restore Hydra's former glory, and named himself the new leader, Black Caesar. Could an organization thought dead really be back? And if so, how long before the rest of the world learned that Alexander Pierce had once sat among its ranks? The recent string of devastating terrorist attacks has all struck men in the Blue Flag country, throwing the financial district into a panic. Business is booming for the Emperor Company's superpowered bodyguards, but no one's feeling particularly safe. A new propaganda video from Hydra has just landed, and it's nothing short of cinematic. In each carefully framed shot, superhumans stand behind Black Caesar, their silhouettes sharp against burning cityscapes. The visuals are slick and stylized, clearly the work of someone with deep pockets and a filmmaker's eye. S.H.I.E.L.D.'s analysis team was practically giddy, praising the lens language and scene design. They half-joked that this must be the footage for the next big-budget Captain America movie. Otherwise, why would anyone outside Alexander Pierce's circle have access to this level of production? Galvatron, S.H.I.E.L.D.'s resident tech whiz, doesn't care whether you call him a truck driver or a film master. If you give him the footage, he can reverse engineer it. Within hours, he had mapped out Hydra's camera rigs, post-production workflow, even the likely studios they contracted. Nick Fury watched the replay twice. What struck him most wasn't just the special effects or the perfectly choreographed villain parade. It was the unmistakable proof that Hydra now has both the resources and the sophistication to pull off large-scale operations. And they're not hiding in the shadows anymore. This is a Hydra with muscle, money, and a marketing budget that rivals any Hollywood blockbuster. Fury leaned back in his chair, realizing just how serious the threat had become. A small cadre of newly awakened mutants has taken on the name Hydra, united by a single-minded zeal. But make no mistake, they're anything but amateurs. Every attack they've launched is executed with surgical precision, betraying an organization that's confident, well-coordinated, and ruthlessly talented. So far, S.H.I.E.L.D.'s intelligence teams have come up with nothing. In the Situation Room, Nick Fury's voice shook as he briefed Alexander Pierce. His hands trembled, not from fear, but from the shock of it all. He'd always believed Hydra was extinct, and certainly never imagined they'd stage a comeback on this scale, directly challenging the world's preeminent superpower. Now S.H.I.E.L.D. is under fire from all sides. Congress is demanding answers, influential business leaders are baying for investigations, and even the Blue Flag country's UN delegates are calling for sanctions. Fury swallowed hard. Hydra is back, he admitted. Pierce leaned forward, eyes locked on the video feed in the dossier labeled Black Caesar. He'd never heard of this Black Caesar. "What's going on?" he muttered. "Who is he, and how did they evade us completely?" Alexander Pierce didn't immediately suspect that Black Caesar was an imposter. Hydra's ranks were labyrinthine. There were immortal veterans who'd slipped away after World War II, operatives who vanished only to reemerge years later, and countless smugglers turned foot soldiers. Alias changes were the norm. Still, Pierce, a devoted protege of the Red Skull, was baffled. In all his years serving Hydra, he'd never heard of anyone called Black Caesar. According to the dossiers Nick Fury had supplied, this Caesar was formidable, well-financed, ruthlessly efficient, perhaps even among Hydra's top commanders. Yet no record in Red Skull's archives bore that name or profile. Of course, someone of Caesar's caliber might simply have altered his identity. Hydra thrived on secrecy. Nevertheless, Pierce decided he needed answers, and fast. Before he could pursue the matter at headquarters, though, he first had to keep Nick Fury from growing even more suspicious. Alexander Pierce didn't need to verify Nick Fury's credentials. He already knew Fury's caliber. After all, he'd appointed him to lead S.H.I.E.L.D. because he trusted his talent. Under Fury's command, the agency soared to new heights, ultimately breaking free from Blue Flag country's control and establishing itself as a truly world-class intelligence organization. It was also Fury's relentless strategy that allowed Hydra to expand as far as it has. "Fury, what's our next move?" Pierce asked. "First, we launch a full-scale investigation," Fury replied, his voice steady. "We'll trace every one of their actions, catalog all the people, incidents, and resources involved. It may seem complex, but if we tackle it piece by piece, something will emerge." He leaned back, steepling his fingers. "Modern investigations aren't like the old days of following footprints and relying on gut feelings. We have scientific methods, data analytics, forensic reconstruction, an arsenal of tools designed to turn the faintest clue into solid evidence. With so many cases and so little to go on, we simply apply the right techniques, and especially when we're facing coordinated attacks on influential figures, we know exactly where to start." Alexander Pierce's brow twitched as he addressed his companion. "You understand that we must shield our financiers' identities, from the public eye and from those who would exploit them. Even someone like Nick Fury, with all his resources, can't always pinpoint their locations. Yet Black Caesar and Hydra never miss their mark. It isn't, strictly speaking, because Hydra covers its tracks flawlessly. Rather, the magnates have moles in their inner circles and vast intelligence networks at their disposal. Fury refuses to believe Hydra could erase every trace so perfectly. The truth is, the larger and more astonishing a conspiracy grows, the more it inevitably leaks. Think about it. Hydra's cells in the newly established nation of Blue Flag have flourished at breakneck speed. Its European and American branches now outstrip every other division, thanks to the tangled relationship between S.H.I.E.L.D. and certain clandestine interests. Dozens of Hydra cells have sprung up across both continents. If Fury were to focus his efforts on a real investigation, he'd soon uncover enough threads to unravel the whole enterprise. Ethan stood off to the side of the dimly lit briefing room, arms folded as Agent Pierce and Nick Fury leaned over the holographic display. Pierce pointed at the schematics, his voice low but tense. "If we go in this heavy-handed, we'll alienate half of S.H.I.E.L.D. Fury took a slow sip of coffee, then shrugged. "Then we'll tell them we're the FBI. Hell, we can claim CIA if it makes you feel better." Pierce shook his head. "Impersonating the FBI is one thing. It happens all the time. But the CIA? They've got jurisdiction, diplomatic red tape, layers of oversight. Do you really want them on our tail?" He glared at Fury. "Next thing you know, we'll have 2 directors breathing down our necks." Fury set his mug on the table, unbothered. "If you can't handle a couple of phone calls, you're in the wrong job." He glanced at Ethan. "And don't worry, kid," he added with a half-smile. "Pierce here is paid to absorb the heat." Pierce muttered under his breath, but Fury was already studying the holo display again. Ethan drew in a steadying breath. He might be the rookie on this op, but there was no turning back now. All that mattered was pulling off the ruse, no matter whose toes they trod on to make it work. Chapter 113. I'll turn Tony Stark to our side. Hydra's brazen announcement had already shaken Blue Flag country to its core. Raging protests in the streets, government officials scrambling for answers, and a swell of panic that threatened to spill over into all-out chaos. Yet inside S.H.I.E.L.D.'s Roosevelt Tower, Director Nick Fury wasn't about to let Hydra's theater of fear slow him down. Pierce, Fury's chief liaison to the Blue Flag government, leaned over Fury's desk, urgency etched across his face. "Nick, listen," he said, lowering his voice. "If we launch a full-scale investigation right now, Hydra will catch wind of it and go underground. We'll never see it coming." Fury turned from the wall of monitors showing live news feeds. His one eye narrowed. Pierce, they've already broadcast their threat at prime time. The entire country is alert. What makes you think we haven't tipped them off already? Pierce ran a hand through his hair, frustration welling up. He knew Fury was right. No excuse could slow the director once he'd set his mind on something, especially not with Blue Flag's top brass publicly demanding that S.H.I.E.L.D. produce results. Fury had the means to dig up Hydra's secrets from any shadowed corner of the globe. Pierce's real hope lay in locating one man, the operative codenamed Black Caesar. He envied Caesar's power, 10 superpowered mutants under his command, the culmination of Baron von Strucker's obsession. Since Hydra's 2 recent triumphs, first manipulating Captain America, then resurrecting the Red Skull, Strucker had thrown himself into dark genetic experiments, determined to birth an army of super soldiers. Understanding that, Pierce forced himself to speak calmly. All right, then we focus on Caesar. If we can track him down and neutralize his team, we pull the rug out from under Strucker. No more 10-man mutant squad to haunt us. Fury folded his arms. Hydra's been researching superpowers in secret for years. Strucker locked himself away, day in and day out, perfecting his own Red Skulls. Black Caesar is his masterpiece, treating them like chess pieces. We take Caesar out of play. We blunt their edge. Pierce nodded, the weight of the mission settling on his shoulders. I'll assemble the best intel teams S.H.I.E.L.D. has. We'll run every lead on Caesar's operatives, financial records, satellite scans, informants in Hydra cells. I won't let him slip through our fingers. Fury allowed himself the barest hint of a grin. Good. And Pierce? Yeah? Make sure Stark's on board. Fury's tone was casual, but the meaning was clear. Tony Stark's influence could tip the scales if he could be convinced to join the fight. Pierce straightened. Consider it done, Director. As Pierce strode out, Fury turned back to the screens. The world was spinning toward panic, and Hydra believed they held all the cards. But S.H.I.E.L.D. was already moving its pieces into place. It was only a matter of time before the hunter became the hunted. Mutants are awakening with new powers at an alarming rate, and every branch of Hydra has been watching Baron Strucker's progress closely. Yet Strucker refuses to share his research or his breakthroughs with anyone. It's hardly surprising. If any of us were in his position, we'd do the same. But Strucker alone holds the key, and the rest of Hydra is eager to benefit. If Pierce can recruit Black Caesar and tap into his mutant abilities, he'll be in a position either to strike a deal or to join Strucker directly, and that would accelerate our Insight project immeasurably. Late last night, Pierce was summoned to an emergency video conference with Hydra's supreme leaders, the so-called Snakeheads. The command deck flickered to life with dozens of projected visages, each face etched with impatience or suspicion. A cold, authoritative voice spoke first. Pierce, what's so urgent that it can't wait until morning? I apologize for the hour, Pierce replied, clearing his throat. But I've uncovered something you need to know immediately. The screens leaned in. Spit it out, another elder snapped. Pierce, he took a steadying breath. Hydra has been exposed. A sudden silence fell. Then a chorus of shocked questions rolled through the speakers. What? How? By whom? Is it my cell that's been compromised? Pierce locked eyes with each leader in turn. I'm still tracing the breach, he said, but it's deep. We have very little time to contain the damage. He paused, letting the gravity of his words sink in. I'll need full support and absolute secrecy if we're going to plug this leak before the world learns the truth. Behind Pierce's calm exterior, his mind raced. If Hydra fell apart now, everything, his own future, the Insight project, even his chance to prove himself, would collapse. But failure was not an option. Not if he could help it. If that's the case, I'll have my men sever all ties with your division. Hydra operatives exchanged quick glances, their interest piqued. Even the normally taciturn Baron Strucker leaned forward. It wasn't my division that was exposed, he said, but tell me, have any of you heard of someone called Black Caesar? Pierce folded his arms, calm but curious. Who is that? There was a ripple of confusion around the table, and Pierce couldn't tell if they were genuinely uninformed or simply playing dumb. He pressed on. Black Caesar is the one who blew our cover. He launched a high-powered terrorist strike against the top leadership of the Blue Flag country. Understand what that means. Their government is in upheaval. And then he publicly claimed responsibility, even declaring himself an agent of Hydra. Pierce shook his head. I've never encountered anyone like him. A tense silence settled over the room. Then Strucker and Baron Zemo exchanged knowing smiles. Zemo's eyes glittered with ambition. Whether Black Caesar is already one of ours or not, we cannot ignore his power. Find him, and if he isn't allied with Hydra, we will make him so. As the two barons spoke, the atmosphere crackled with renewed purpose. The hunt for Black Caesar had just begun. They already knew about the superpowered terrorist attack, but not about what came next. Their concern had always been the metahumans themselves. The moment Black Caesar's name surfaced, however, their interest skyrocketed. My objective hasn't changed, Pierce said, his voice steady. Find Black Caesar and his men. No organization on Earth can hide from Hydra. He paused to let that sink in before continuing. Hydra's network spanned every continent. The Red Skull's World War II cell had been only one branch, one that, despite countless crackdowns, never truly went away. Over the decades, the organization had quietly rebuilt itself, weaving assets and informants into governments, corporations, even private militias. From Hydra's top echelons down to its lowest foot soldiers, loyalty ran straight through the chain of command, making it all but impossible for anyone linked to Caesar's operation to slip through the cracks. Ethan listened, unconvinced. He had no desire to sign on with Hydra. Instead, he would appropriate the name for his own purposes, create a new Hydra in name only. There would be no sprawling bureaucracy, no hidden cells bursting with agents. At least for now, the facade would serve his goals. After all, his AI network, Tongtian, boasted only a fraction of the raw power possessed by the likes of Galvatron. But even a fraction could be enough to give Hydra's hunters the illusion of an all-seeing force, and that was precisely the advantage Ethan needed. Chapter 7. The Price of Amusement. Ethan surveyed the plans one more time and couldn't help but smirk. Here he was, an artificial intelligence powerful enough to dominate entire galaxies and erase countless civilizations from the map, commissioning an elaborate personal assistant and entertainment suite purely for his own amusement. By any rational measure, it was the height of extravagance, yet Ethan indulged himself. If he could afford it, why not? Unbeknownst to the top brass at Hydra, their private video conference had already been intercepted by Galvatron. With a smirk of his own, Galvatron switched the feed to Ethan's private holoscreen. This should be interesting, he muttered, watching as Pierce and the other Hydra directors fidgeted in their seats. Watching them squirm delighted Ethan even more. After all, he'd created Hydra not only to shoulder the fallout from his schemes, but also to see them dance on puppet strings. Now poor Pierce was practically chewing his lip raw, anxiety radiating off him in waves. Ethan leaned back in his chair and chuckled. Meanwhile, Tony Stark still hasn't developed the Iron Man suit, he mused aloud. Instead, he's off chasing super-terrorist leads and designing anti-powered weapon prototypes. That was exactly why Ethan would have to steer Stark back onto the right path. Without the fires of his genius focus forged into Iron Man, the game simply wouldn't be as entertaining. And Ethan intended to make sure the show went on, no matter how wasteful it might seem. That night, Ethan was entertaining a young model in his private suite when the door suddenly burst open. His trusted bodyguard, Happy, went down in an instant, unconscious before he even hit the floor. In poured a team of half a dozen operatives, all dressed head to toe in black, armed to the teeth. Ethan didn't even flinch. "Nice of you to drop by," he drawled, flexing his arms and legs as his enhanced muscles rippled beneath his shirt. Thanks to the experimental Monarch Corporation serum in his veins, he'd always been confident he could handle 12 men if he had to. But before he could strike, a fist blurred through the air faster than a bullet and snapped into his jaw. The blow was so sudden and precise that Ethan's world went black. Simultaneously, the two models with him let out startled screams, and then fell silent as another operative struck them cold. When Happy finally came to, he scrambled to his knees, panic flooding in. He yanked out his phone and dialed the only person he knew could help. Pepper Potts. Ethan's been kidnapped." Pepper froze at the other end of the line. For months, she'd watched Ethan push himself to unlock the secrets of Monarch's superhuman enhancements. Though he'd never replicated their research, they'd managed to administer the serum to him. and what it gave him was no ordinary strength. A dozen trained bodyguards couldn't have taken him down in his sleep, yet here he was, gone without a trace. Pepper clenched the phone. Whoever had done this had to know exactly what they were getting themselves into, and if they thought Ethan was easy prey, they were about to get a very painful lesson. Chapter 114, Wake Up. Tony Stark had always been wary of Monarch Corporation's so-called enhancement, Compound Number 1. After all, in the original timeline, he'd never heard of Captain America's super soldier serum or Wakanda's heart-shaped herb. He trusted his armor, not magic or mystery drugs. But this wasn't the story he knew. In this reality, Tony had pored over the data on Compound Number 1, puzzled by its alien signature, yet convinced it wouldn't turn him into some uncontrollable monster, or let someone else pull his strings. Reluctantly, he agreed to the procedure. Happy Hogan, by contrast, flat-out refused. He treated the idea of bodily modification like radiation from a cell tower antenna, an unacceptable risk. No amount of reassurance would convince him they weren't tampering with his very humanity. Meanwhile, Tony's unexplained absence sent shockwaves through S.H.I.E.L.D. Nick Fury was certain it was Hydra's handiwork. Alexander Pierce shook his head. No, Pierce insisted. There's no way Hydra pulled this off. Fury cut him off. We don't have time for debate. They've already made their move on Stark. Hasn't Black Caesar formally claimed responsibility for this yet? Pierce asked warily, pressing his fingers to his temples. Do we have to wait until Tony Stark is dead before we take action? Nick Fury glanced at him, eyes narrowing in surprise. Remember, Stark isn't just any target. He's deeply entwined with so many interests. Even we have to pick our moment carefully. There was no arguing with Fury, and Pierce's mind was already on the verge of short circuit. Kidnapped? Tony Stark? The news had rocked all of Blue Flag country. No one knew where the kidnappers had come from, or what they intended. Were they after Stark's fortune, or his cutting-edge technology? Had Stark unwittingly provided them weapons through a hidden back door? It seemed impossible, but the signs pointed that way. For the past decade, this mysterious group had quietly purchased just enough advanced weaponry from Stark Industries to launder funds without drawing attention. Their creations had stunned the world, yet 70 to 80% of their high-end arsenal still bore Stark's signature engineering. Now, as authorities scrambled to trace the kidnappers' trail, every question only deepened the mystery and the danger surrounding Tony Stark's disappearance. No way. Stark Industries' technology and weapons were still leagues ahead of anything we had. Even after Fury secured Pierce's reluctant approval, he didn't hesitate. He'd already set things in motion. Pierce could grumble all he liked, but there was nothing he could do. Fury wasn't a rookie. He'd once run the covert Ghost operation. When an operation leaves no paper trail, no one in the Blue Flag Alliance dares question it. After Fury strode out, Pierce felt an odd itch creeping across his scalp. He rubbed at it and recoiled in horror when a handful of hair slid through his fingers. What on earth? Pierce stared at the tufts of hair in his palm. He'd spent months perfecting that haircut. How could it have thinned so dramatically overnight? Then he remembered the crushing stress of the last few days, the moments when his mind felt ready to burst into flames. Could that much anxiety really trigger hair loss? The thought of going bald made his stomach twist. No more panicking. From now on, he told himself, it was time to take control. First order of business, find the elusive contact known as Black Caesar. With Tony Stark still missing, every unit in the FBI and every precinct in the city was already working around the clock. There was no time to waste. Our superiors have already made it crystal clear. There will be no vacations. Not even those who are sick in bed, unless they're on their deathbed, can skip work. And if we fail to locate Tony Stark for a single day, that day off is gone too. The CIA has activated its entire global intelligence network. Hydra or not, they want answers this time, or the agency's director will be replaced. That's why the FBI is working around the clock. We're past the days of Hoover's all-powerful FBI. Now the orders cascade down from above, each layer turning the screws tighter. Ethan wasn't the least bit surprised by the mounting commotion. In the original timeline, the fallout was confined to Afghanistan and barely registered. Now, however, with Hydra's name invoked and Stark kidnapped in that Blue Flag country, the stakes have skyrocketed. And yet, despite all the noise and pressure, neither the FBI nor local law enforcement has managed to follow a single viable lead. No one could pinpoint the flaw in the hotel's security footage. The place was bristling with cameras, yet Galvatron's super AI had found every blind spot, total invisibility. Meanwhile, Tony Stark, the world's most wanted man, slowly came to. His vision swam as he registered walls of peeling paint and flickering fluorescent lights. He sat up, heart pounding. What the? Am I kidnapped? He shook his head, trying to clear the haze. Just moments ago, he'd injected himself with compound number 1, transforming into a walking powerhouse. Yet here he was, waking up as if he'd been hit by a freight train. One brutal punch was enough to KO him. No mere street thug could do that. Superman's serum and compound number 1, he muttered, piecing it together. Only someone else on the same chemicals, or already altered by compound number 1, could rival his strength. He scowled. That kid Ethan really needs to stop leaving his stockpile of super serum lying around. Tony glanced around the grimy room. This wasn't a luxury suite. It was a rat's nest. Whoever had him wasn't planning on hospitality. He flexed his fingers, preparing to test his limits and make his next move. Ethan drew in a ragged breath of the searing air and winced. Even with compound number 1 augmenting his lungs, the heat and dryness bit at him. To anyone else, this oxygen-starved atmosphere would have been deadly. To him, it was merely inconvenient. Dry, scorching, and this cramped, cavernous space. He forced himself to stay calm. He hadn't been abducted and dragged out of Blue Flag country, had he? He glanced around, taking in every detail. Compound number 1 hadn't just strengthened his lungs, it had honed all of his senses. His vision alone now surpassed that of any ordinary man, telescopic for distant landmarks, microscopic for the faintest speck, and exquisitely tuned to motion and stillness alike. Even in this dim grotto, he could see as clearly as if sunlight flooded the space. His skin responded too. The pores pinched shut to conserve moisture in the stifling heat, while unseen channels carried away excess warmth. He felt every shift, the tightening of his pores, the subtle rerouting of blood flow, the way his body chose to cool itself. And if he wanted, he could override those instincts, open every pore, sweat freely, and dump heat with maximum efficiency. In short, compound number 1 granted him a measure of control over his own physiology that no normal human enjoyed. As he steadied his racing thoughts, he realized that understanding these new limits and possibilities would be his first step to finding out where he really was. The sensation was so incredible that Ethan could feel the individual threads of his clothing against his skin. Chapter 115. Hi, Hydra. After Tony Stark felt the full effects of the compound coursing through his veins, one thought crystallized in his mind. Ethan, the man who created compound number 1, had outdone even Dr. Abraham Erskine and his legendary super soldier serum. Tony never said this aloud, but he recognized the truth immediately. What he didn't realize at first was how singular his own reaction had been. None of the other test subjects who received compound 1 underwent changes remotely like his. The reason was simple. Tony's brain was not ordinary. Decades of scientific inquiry had rewired his neural pathways, sharpening his intellect beyond that of any normal human. Even if he hadn't fully embraced what some called the curse of knowledge, his cognitive capacity was still leagues ahead of the average person's. Compound 1 was designed to be a total body upgrade, which necessarily included the brain. In theory, everyone who took the injection should have seen an equivalent mental leap. In reality, though, most recipients didn't know how to use the gift they'd been given. So much of our brain's power resides beneath the level of conscious thought, governed by the subconscious. Without a well-trained mind, or a mind already inclined toward scientific and analytical thinking, no amount of biochemical enhancement could unlock those deeper layers. Tony, by contrast, had both the hardware and the software to exploit every ounce of potential compound 1 offered. And now, fully aware of what Ethan had achieved, he was more dangerous than ever. Ethan had learned to master virtually every function of his body, and then some. By focusing his mind, he could shift into distinct performance modes he dubbed adrenaline surge, peak human, and beyond peak. Each state was nothing more than precise, conscious regulation of his own physiology. When he activated it, his muscles synchronized flawlessly, delivering strength far beyond normal human limits. But power wasn't the only gift. Ethan discovered he could accelerate his healing, too. A deep wound wouldn't bleed out. Instead, he would clamp down internally, seal the injury, and knit tissues back together at a phenomenal rate. The trade-off, however, was exhaustion, pure mental and physical fatigue. After only an hour of holding these extreme states, his body would shut down. He tested this one afternoon when he cut his forearm on a dull kitchen knife. Under ordinary circumstances, the gash might have taken a week or more to close. Instead, Ethan slipped into his healing protocol for 60 minutes straight. By the next morning, the scab had fallen away, revealing fresh, pink flesh. If he could maintain that level of control, he realized the skin might regrow in mere hours. It was nothing short of miraculous, and if this was possible for a simple cut, then regenerating an entire severed limb might not be so far-fetched after all. At that moment, the cavern's heavy iron door groaned open. A dozen figures stepped inside, clad in the familiar dress of Afghan insurgents, baggy tunics, loose trousers, and wrapped turbans, but the weapons they carried told a different story. These were no ordinary Taliban fighters. Instead of the ubiquitous, cheaply made AK-pattern rifles, each man bore a sleek, fully accessorized assault weapon that could cost as much as half a dozen AKs combined. Tony Stark sized them up in an instant. Cornered, unarmed, and outgunned, he knew there was no point in fighting. One stray bullet would end him, or worse, leave him crippled. So he kept his expression calm and raised his hands slightly. "Who are you?" he asked evenly. They hadn't executed him, which meant he was worth something: money, technology, or perhaps both. The man in the center, a tall figure with sharp eyes, took a step forward. His rifle's foregrip was custom-milled. The folding stock was reinforced with carbon fiber. "Tony Stark," he voiced low but firm. "You know exactly who we are and why we've come for you." Chapter 7. If you cut off one head, 2 more will grow. The heavy echo of the maske. D-Man's words filled the abandoned warehouse. He stood at the far end of the hall, clad in a flowing black turban, a dark mask hiding his features and tinted goggles concealing his eyes. His lips curved into a cruel smile. "You're facing Hydra." Ethan's heart skipped. Hydra, whispered about in every corner of the intelligence world, commanded 10 enhanced operatives, each possessing near-superhuman abilities. Even the elite bodyguards employed by the Emperor Corporation were hard-pressed to contain them. Until now, Ethan had felt secure. He'd assigned a superhuman protector to watch over his bodyguard Peppa, a capable woman whose loyalty was beyond question. For himself, however, he'd trusted in luck and common sense, an oversight he now regretted. He forced his voice to remain calm. "What do you want?" The masked leader's grin widened. "Your brilliance. We want you to join Hydra." Ethan laughed coldly. "That's not happening." Silence fell for a heartbeat. Then the leader gave a curt nod. "Then teach him a lesson." In an instant, Ethan was pummeled by a storm of fists and boots. Each blow rattled his skull, drove the air from his lungs, and threatened to drag him into darkness. He tasted blood, felt the world tilt, and struggled to keep his eyes open as the mercenaries closed in for the kill. Ethan gritted his teeth, desperately trying to clamp down on the pain signals coursing through his body. But the world spun so violently that he lost control of even that small mercy. Every nerve ending shouted agony. From somewhere beyond the steel door, he caught snatches of conversation. "He's been injected with Compound 1 to trigger the transformation. Don't worry, he won't die. Every 3 days, we give him a beating, then throw him in the dark cell. No food until after the next round. One of our rations won't last a spoiled rich boy like him 3 days. Another guard scoffed. He's never been used to roughing it. The door slammed shut. Pitch black swallowed him whole. When Ethan finally came to, his body was aching and strangely light. The extra fat he'd carried as padding while he healed was gone. His energy reserves were depleted, and the hunger gnawing at him was fiercer than anything he'd ever felt. He'd never been truly overweight. He'd simply needed the extra bulk to cushion his injuries. With nothing but darkness around him and no way to mark the passage of time, Ethan slipped into a state of semi-sleep. His superhuman metabolism let him slow his heart rate, reduce his energy needs, and cling to consciousness only long enough to endure, counting on each moment of rest to stretch what little strength he had left. Chapter X. The CEO's capitulation. Ethan watched Tony Stark's defiance drain away under the harsh glare of the single hanging light bulb. Prolonged isolation does that. Tony knew it as well as anyone, yet he'd exhausted every attempt to resist. Now beaten and wary, he seemed to understand that outright defiance was pointless. Better to bide his time and look for an opening. From his vantage point behind the reinforced door, Ethan studied Tony's every twitch and flinch. He couldn't help but admire the man's stubborn core. He truly is worthy of the name Tony Stark, Ethan thought. Either Hydra's compound number 1 has rewired him, or this version of Stark carries a subtle difference I can't quite place. He stepped back. Killing Tony was never the plan. This wasn't torture for its own sake. It was a crucible meant to break and reshape Hydra's greatest rival, an audacious move in their escalating corporate war. Kidnapping the other side's CEO was the ultimate power play. 3 days later, Tony was dragged out of his cell again, bruised and exhausted, his hands still clamped in iron cuffs. The guards raised their batons, ready to rain down another round of punishment, when Tony's voice rang out, unexpectedly loud. "Wait! I'm willing to join Hydra! Yes, Hydra!" Silence fell so quickly that the echo of his own words seemed to hang in the air. Every operative froze. "Boss," Galvatron said, stepping forward and holding up a compact recorder. "I've captured it all." Ethan allowed himself a small, satisfied smile. "Excellent," he replied. "Very well done." Chapter 16. Ethan, the man who persuades. Ethan sat back in his chair, replaying the clip of Tony Stark erupting with Hydra on his phone. He tapped a fingertip against his lips. "I wonder how Fury would react if I forwarded this to him." For a moment, he seriously considered it, but without a truly foolproof plan to trap Stark, the stunt would fizzle out. He needed to drive Stark so deep into this betrayal that there was no turning back. Only then would the spectacle be worth the trouble. Sure enough, the moment Stark roared Hydra, the local cell interpreted it as a genuine offer of defection. A squad of burly agents hustled him into a fluorescent-lit laboratory for interrogation. At a steel table sat their leader, a pale-faced man who went by Blue Skull. He studied Stark coolly, steepling his fingers. "We're very interested in your weaponry, particularly your anti-superhuman arms. Tell me about the Jericho missile." Tony Stark's jaw twitched at the familiar name. He opened his mouth to deliver one of his trademark quips, but then he glanced around at the guards flanking the room. Each was at least as tall as Shaquille O'Neal, their uniforms straining over biceps that could probably crush steel. Stark bit back the sarcasm and simply waited for their next move. They didn't even have to check the files to know the subject had been injected with compound number 1. Faced with the same pressures, Tony Stark wouldn't risk a direct confrontation. He's too smart for that. And Ethan had made sure he understood exactly why. Time and again, Ethan had paraded those thermal cannons before him, proved their one-shot lethality, and reminded Stark how utterly helpless anyone is when firepower like that is in play. It forced Tony to shelve any fantasies of brawling his way out. Sure enough, it didn't take Tony long to piece it together. What he needed wasn't more muscle or a tricked-out suit. It was a weapon capable of delivering those same superheated warheads. Only a single, devastating thermal strike would let him punch free from this Hydra compound packed with enhanced soldiers and powered operatives. In effect, Ethan had recreated his own worst-case scenario so Tony could learn from it, and Tony rose to the challenge. Under the pretense of requisitioning supplies for hydraulic test equipment, he calmly ordered the very components that would let him build compact thermal missiles. Ethan watched the request roll through the Hydra logistics system and scowled. "Gold titanium alloy, huh? What missile uses gold titanium for its casing?" He waved dismissively as he spoke. "You think we're fools? Fine. If he's so clever, let's see how honest he is under pressure." He turned to the nearest squad of Hydra agents. "Take Stark in there. A few choice questions, and maybe a little persuasion should loosen his tongue." Within moments, the guards herded Tony away, leaving Ethan alone in the dimly lit control room. He leaned back, crossed his arms, and allowed himself a small, satisfied smile. Let's see how genius fares when the heat is turned up. Damn it! How did Hydra get hold of the Jericho missiles materials list? Tony Stark muttered, his violet and blue eyes flashing in the dim light. He'd never imagined that Hydra could breach his most closely guarded secrets. Even if they lacked the missile's blueprints and technical schematics, the procurement list alone was classified at the highest level, especially for his newest weapon. There was only one explanation: a mole in his company. And the more he thought about it, the more certain he became that the leak had come from Ethan's guidance. Ethan, his once trusted protege, must have led Hydra right to these files. Tony had toyed with letting Ethan reverse engineer Compound 1 and develop a stronger super soldier formula, but that would have steered him away from the Iron Man project. It wasn't what Tony had in mind. Now, faced with no other choice, Tony would repurpose the Jericho missile materials. He'd forge them into something even more powerful: an iron suit, his cross-era masterpiece. Ace. Iron Man, he'd call it. Fortunately, the Hydra lab he infiltrated wasn't bristling with high-tech security. No visible cameras or scanners. Still, he knew the place was crawling with hidden bugs and buried listening devices. To avoid tipping them off, he'd speak as little as possible and move even more quietly. He tapped into the lab's terminal, fingers flying across the keyboard. Every keystroke brought him closer to the schematics he needed to kickstart his suit's design. The room hummed with the low thrum of servers and power conduits, but Tony's mind buzzed louder. Plans, calculations, contingencies. He would turn Hydra's own resources against them and reclaim the advantage. Tonight, Iron Man would be born. Ethan worked in near silence. Without Jarvis to run diagnostics and without the well-stocked workshop he once had in the basement, every modification now had to be done by hand, every bolt tightened, every circuit soldered, every calculation double-checked. He'd taken to calling this phase Tony Stark's trial by fire, and the name suited him perfectly. After all, if Stark hadn't completed the overhaul on Compound Number 1 in that cave, if he'd tried it without Yinsen's help, he never would have succeeded. Back in Malibu, Obadiah Stane found himself caught between relief and irritation when word came that Stark had returned. A stalwart veteran of Stark Industries, Obadiah harbored ambitions of his own, dreams of moving up, of finally seizing real power. But the sudden rise of the Imperial Company and the emergence of Ethan forced him to keelhaul those plans. He stayed by Tony's side, reluctantly aiding the man he secretly considered an irresponsible dilettante. Because without Stark at the helm, Stark Industries would crumble under the Imperial Company's onslaught. And the fallout from the original Compound Number 1, paired with rumors of a so-called super soldier serum, had already cost them a lucrative weapons contract with Hammer Industries. Arnold Hammer himself was seething. He'd attempted to negotiate, to reason with Stark Industries, but he dared not cross Ethan or the shadowy new backers behind the Imperial Company. Now, Ethan tightened the last fastener on his prototype armor. He could feel the tension coiling in the air. Every decision he made from here on out would tip the balance, either ensuring the Imperial Company's dominance or handing the future back to Tony Stark and his legacy. Chapter X. Fine. Contact the 10 Rings. Bring Tony Stark back. Obadiah Stark exhaled, rubbing the bridge of his nose. Stark Industries stock was in free fall. From the moment the world learned of Tony Stark's disappearance, billions in market value evaporated seemingly overnight. They'd already taken a beating from Imperial Company's hostile maneuvers. Now, this fresh calamity threatened to finish them off. With few options left, Obadiah was resorting to every connection he had, official and clandestine alike, to locate the missing genius. Ethan watched, incredulous. He had expected panic or outrage, not this poised determination. It was as if he'd stepped into a parallel universe where Obadiah was a benevolent guardian rather than a ruthless executive. The ease with which he issued orders made Ethan's head spin. Then Obadiah spoke the forbidden name. "The 10 Rings," he said into his secure link. Alarm bells rang in Ethan's mind. The 10 Rings weren't a contractor you could book through a broker. They were a terrorist network entrenched in Afghanistan. No legitimate businessman would have their direct line. Unless, Ethan's heart pounded as pieces fell into place. Years ago, clandestine CIA operations in the region had coincided with the disappearance of advanced weapons from Stark's vaults. Rumor had it that Obadiah had engineered a covert arms pipeline, funneling Stark prototypes to the insurgents in exchange for deniability and profit. He'd effectively armed the group that would become the 10 Rings. Obadiah's calm demeanor gave nothing away as he keyed in the final digits and pressed send. A low hum of static replied. Ethan clenched his fists. If Obadiah had indeed supplied the 10 Rings with Stark weaponry, then his rescue mission was a smokescreen for something far darker. Ethan knew he was staring down a crisis that cut deeper than a kidnapped CEO or a plummeting stock price. He had to uncover Obadiah's true intentions, and fast, before Tony became collateral in a scheme more sinister than anyone imagined. End of chapter. Ethan paused to think it through. Even if Obadiah had secret contacts, there was no way he could have slipped that equipment to the 10 Rings without someone noticing. The world really is full of surprises, Ethan mused. He wasn't in the business of reforming people, especially not Obadiah, who might well continue whatever experiments he was conducting on Sheeta K. So it wasn't worth his time. He set the thought aside. Intrigues like this were mere distractions. Ethan had bigger concerns. Take Emperor Corporation, for example. In the aftermath of the superpowered terrorist attacks, it had exploded into a corporate behemoth, its assets soaring past the 100 billion mark. The company was thriving, its coffers overflowing, and yet Ethan felt none of the excitement you'd expect from such success. Fortunately, Galvatron had everything under control. He'd been expertly steering Emperor through the markets, speculating in stocks and expanding into new sectors along the blueprint Ethan had drawn up, a blueprint itself modeled on the old Shinra structure. Though the company's flagship remained its revolutionary human augmentation technology, it was already branching out into multiple other industries. And for now, that was more than enough. Chapter 117. Target Emperor Company's talent shortage was no obstacle for Ethan. In this age of ubiquitous information, what couldn't he uncover? He could trace anyone's history from birth to the present with absolute clarity. Even if Blue Flag Country lacked comprehensive sky-eye surveillance, it didn't matter to Ethan. Wherever there was a record, whether on paper, a local network, or a hard drive, he could access it. Simply powering down the system was no defense against him. What had begun as a modest personnel gap had ballooned to nearly 100,000 vacancies, far surpassing the hiring capacity of Stark Industries. Today, Emperor Company was every bit as formidable as the long-established industrial giants that had amassed capital over decades. It had grown into an entity so entrenched that no challenger could shake it loose. Ethan was confident that even if a rival attempted to sow trouble, soaring unemployment and a public outcry would swiftly bury any such scheme before it could gain traction. Ethan leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. Even if Galvatron couldn't outright eliminate his rivals, it could still sabotage them behind the scenes. That was the essence of real corporate warfare. The AI had mastered human politics in ways Ethan hadn't even imagined. Galvatron quietly poured money into the campaigns of dozens of district and state council candidates, and before long it had secured a line to the current Secretary of State. Someday that office would be handed to General Ross, better known as the Hulk's future father-in-law, but for now it remained occupied by another bureaucrat. At the same time, Galvatron reached out to the vice president, exploiting one pointed fact: the VP's daughter was wheelchair-bound. Though the vice presidency appeared to rank below the presidency, in reality both positions were merely figureheads, gatekeepers for the same circle of powerful industrialists. In the Blue Flag Nation, which was really just a private corporation masquerading as a country, that was standard practice. Galvatron offered the VP's daughter something few could refuse: a cutting-edge regenerative therapy to rebuild her shattered limbs. Grateful and indebted, the vice president became another string in the AI's rapidly expanding network of influence. Ethan sighed, half in admiration, half in exasperation. An artificial intelligence had outmaneuvered him at every turn, playing politics better than any human ever could. Ethan could have done far better if he'd really wanted to, but he wasn't interested in grandstanding. His plan to turn the Imperial Company into a corporate titan on par with Shinra was nothing more than a passing fancy. If it worked, he'd enjoy the ride. If it failed, it wouldn't bother him. After all, the Blue Flag Country was the most powerful nation on the planet. So long as Ethan avoided stirring up trouble, acting under its banner practically guaranteed success. He could even summon the CIA or the FBI at will, and they'd have to respond. What mattered most to Ethan now was accelerating and perfecting his fusion technique. The ideal route, he decided, was to slip into the DC universe, find Superman, and extract the life code from him. With that power in hand, he'd be unstoppable. But first came focus. After a bit of playful experimentation, Ethan settled down to serious training. He thought of Broly, the legendary Super Saiyan, an icon of raw, unbridled strength. That was precisely what Ethan aspired to become. A new Broly, only stronger. He would tap into limitless potential, boundless energy, and unimaginable physical might. And once he did, nothing in any world would stand in his way. In the Dragon Ball universe, there exists an alternate, much older Broly whose power doubles automatically every year, and who wields virtually unlimited energy and strength. Rumor has it that this ancient Broly resides in a parallel reality. Ethan couldn't shake the thought, what if he could slip into that universe, either by using Bulma's time machine or by wishing it with the Dragon Balls, and splice Broly's supercharged genes into his own? He'd gain boundless potential, and his power would keep doubling year after year without him lifting a finger. The catch, of course, was that jumping between universes offered no guarantees. There was no way to be sure the next jump would deposit him in that specific Broly world. Ethan sighed. Both methods, time travel or Dragon Ball wishcraft, felt out of reach for now. And even if he managed to activate the portal, there was no telling where he'd end up. If he really wanted to visit the DC universe next, he'd have to gamble that his next dimensional leap landed him there. Otherwise, he might find himself in some mundane world, reduced to nothing more than a spectator once again. Wait, there's actually a third option, Ethan whispered, his mind racing. He just realized the answer lay in the Infinity Stones, the fabled treasures of the Marvel Universe. If he could claim the Time Stone and spend 100,000 years absorbing its energy, couldn't he ascend to near-divine power? With the Power Stone, he might unlock dormant potential rivaling a Super Saiyan, a Kryptonian, or even Doomsday himself. And the Ether, the Reality Stone, could literally rewrite his genetic code, repairing and enhancing him at the molecular level. After all, ether particles bent reality to the wielder's will, subverting logic itself. Their only weakness was the tremendous life force they demanded, but Ethan had more vitality than any ordinary human, thanks to the Doomsday essence he'd absorbed. More importantly, the Power Stone acted like a cosmic battery, energizing the others and magnifying their effects. In Marvel's cosmic hierarchy, the ether functioned as a supercharged reality engine, an invincible, all-purpose tool for reshaping existence. If Ethan could gather the Infinity Stones and wield them in concert, he'd stand unrivaled. The prospect sent a thrill through him, not just survival, but transcendence. It wasn't an exaggeration to call it a dream come true, or rather, the immutable law of the universe. Once the 9 realms fused into one, a hidden chamber sealed by ether particles would finally reveal itself. But now, apart from the late God King Bor, no one, dark elves included, knew where those particles lay concealed. Only the power gem held the secret of their location. Ethan's mind raced. He couldn't afford to wait centuries for the world trees merging to trigger the cosmic convergence. There was a far quicker way. The cosmic cube, the legendary space gem. With its power, he could fold and unfold space at will, warping distances, opening portals, even teleporting across galaxies. After all, it was by channeling the space gem's energy that Captain Marvel rose to his full strength. Why does this feel like a Japanese RPG? Ethan muttered to himself. Do I chase down the space gem first, then unite the 9 realms to unlock the ether chamber? Or should I hunt the power gem first, then use it to pinpoint the space gem's hiding place? He took a breath. Frustration warred with excitement, but one fact remained clear. He already knew where the space gem was hidden, and soon, nothing would stand in his way. Ethan stood alone in S.H.I.E.L.D.'s underground fortress, the cavernous lab illuminated by rows of humming machinery. Before him floated a 3-dimensional star map, its constellations and waypoints shifting beneath his gaze. At his side, Galvatron, a sleek, sentient automaton, completed its data download from S.H.I.E.L.D.'s classified archives. Ethan traced a glowing trajectory with his fingertip. The power gem is too distant, he said, voice low. Even if I could assemble a starship on the spot, we'd run out of fuel before ever reaching it. The space gem, however, lies within reach. He paused, curiosity flickering in his eyes. And if I, an outsider, were to come into direct contact with the space gem, would I absorb its power? Galvatron's optics pulsed as it processed the question. Calculated probability of successful energy integration, high, it replied in a cool, electronic tone, initiating search protocol for all SHIELD hidden artifacts. Ethan nodded. The hunt for the space gem had begun. Chapter 118, Cosmic Cube. Long before stars first ignited, the universe was born of 6 boundless singularities, each a font of unimaginable power. The god of the universe shaped these singularities into 6 infinity gems, artifacts of infinite energy. Fearing their raw potential, he sealed them within a single vessel, the cosmic cube. Over the eons, countless civilizations have wrested the cube from hiding, each hoping to bend its power to their own ends. March 1942, Tunsberg, Norway. Deep within an abandoned church, Hydra operatives under Johann Red Skull Schmidt unearthed the long-lost cosmic cube. Their aim was simple, weaponize its power to turn the tide of World War II. But when Schmidt attempted to harness the cube aboard a secrecy-shrouded bomber, he was met in the cockpit by Captain Steve Rogers. Their clash overloaded the cube's energy core, tearing open a fractal wormhole. In the ensuing chaos, Red Skull was flung into the void, and Steve plunged into the frigid North Sea to prevent the bomber's imminent explosion. 3 years later, Howard Stark, Tony Stark's father, mounted a daring Arctic recovery mission. Though he failed to find his missing comrade, he retrieved the irradiated remains of the aircraft and secured the cosmic cube. Fearing its destructive potential, Stark turned it over to the newly formed SLD, where it would be locked away under the highest security. In 2017, Thanos encountered Red Skull on the desolate world of Vormir, where the skull was doomed to guard the Soul Gem for eternity. Yet the cube lay silent, hidden from even a mad Titan's grasp. Today, under the alias Dr. Lawson, Ethan, formerly known by the codename Luther, has joined S.H.I.E.L.D. His mission: to probe the cube's secrets from within and ensure that its power never falls into the wrong hands. As long as the Infinity Gems exist, the balance of everything hangs by a thread, and Ethan intends to keep it from unraveling. Chapter 7, The Pegasus Project. Ethan had volunteered for the Pegasus Project, S.H.I.E.L.D's covert program to harness the cosmic cube in order to develop a light-speed engine. As a Skrull living under Kree domination, he knew firsthand the cost of oppression, and he swore he would never allow the Kree to claim this breakthrough for themselves. Keeping his true motives hidden, he helped refine the reactor's intricate energy matrix, all the while plotting to deny his oppressors the prize. But the Kree acted swiftly. They dispatched Officer Yanrog to eliminate any threats, Ethan included. On the day of the first test flight, Ethan stowed away aboard the prototype jet, determined to destroy the engine before Yanrog could seize it. Captain Carol Danvers piloted the craft, confident it would achieve orbit. Instead, Yanrog's fighter sprang from the clouds, unleashing a fusillade of ion blasts. The assault was brutal. Yanrog's shots ripped through the engine stabilizers, sending the jet into a violent spin. Ethan was gravely wounded by shrapnel and lost consciousness as Danvers fought the controls. With the reactor on the brink of capture, Carol made a final, desperate decision. She overloaded the core, triggering a massive explosion that obliterated the engine. In that blinding flash, energy coursed through her, fusing with her cells, and Carol Danvers was reborn with superhuman power. Far above the stricken jet, a shapeless cosmic horror known as the Devourer drifted through space. It greedily swallowed the reactor's residual energy, only to regurgitate it moments later, completely unharmed. No mere Infinity Stone could have withstood such raw power without corroding. Even Thanos, legends said, endured their energy for only so long. Back on Earth, word of the accident rippled through S.H.I.E.L.D's highest echelons. Galvatron, a notorious black market dealer, broke into S.H.I.E.L.D's most secure databanks and uncovered a catalog of hidden artifacts, fragments of the cosmic cube, experimental weapon prototypes, and even an ancient inhuman obelisk. He delivered the intelligence to Ethan, still recovering in a clandestine infirmary. Ethan scanned the dossier and frowned. The obelisk was said to grant tremendous abilities to inhuman subjects, but to him, they were amateurs, their gifts unpredictable and paltry compared to what he planned next. Setting the file aside, he refocused on the true prize, ensuring the Kree never rose again, and claiming the power they craved for himself. In the shadowy corridors of power, the stakes had never been higher, and Ethan was ready to tip the balance. Ethan paused in the storage wing, scanning rows of unmarked cases. Mutants didn't exist in this universe. If they did, he'd jump at the chance to experiment with an X-gene fusion and see whether he could awaken any latent superpowers. According to the Super Seminary's lore, the X-gene is the most primitive of all supergenes, its potential boundless across infinite realities. If that were true, even a simple tiger should be no match for its bearer. His eyes settled on a metal crate stamped Code U84. In S-Shield jargon, 084 wasn't a single object, but a catch-all designation for a collection of mysterious artifacts. One of them, he recalled, was the Cosmic Cube. Somewhere deep beneath the base, codenamed Project Pegasus, agents were conducting secret research to unlock its reality-warping power. Next to the Cosmic Cube's container, sandwiched between ancient relics and alien devices, lay the so-called Dark Book. In the Marvel Legends, this was the infamous tome the Ancient One had once locked away, forbidden even to Earth's greatest sorcerers. Now, Athena-class security scans confirmed, it sat on S-Shield's shelves. The book had been forged in homage to the primordial god Sithon, chronicling unspeakable black magic, and even a so-called secret of immortality. Ethan felt a chill as he read that. It was nothing short of suicidal to open it. He couldn't help but wonder if someone here was binge-watching Agents of S-Shield and thought they'd rewrite the storyline in real life. He shifted his gaze to the rest of 84's contents, gleaming stones, curious crystals, and vials of glowing fluid. He dared not touch the Dark Book, though. Even with the incomplete magic Purunga had granted him in the Dragon Ball world, where he'd earned the title of Magic Master, this artifact was on another level entirely. Better to let it lie sealed, at least until he had a plan. Ethan frowned as he reviewed the arcane hieroglyphs. Without Sethon's aid, there was no way to tap into the powers of the Great Kai, the god of destruction, or even the angels. The venerable originator of all black magic, reigned supreme across the multiverse and held sway over the dimensional demons themselves. Every dark sorcerer, from Dormammu of the Dark Dimension to lesser netherworld warlocks, was indebted to him for forbidden know-how. Even the Ancient One, Earth's supreme sorcerer, had a habit of deflecting his own debts with Sithon and other fiendish lords onto Dormammu. Legends spoke of the Dark Book as if anyone could simply pick it up and harness its secrets, but Ethan knew better. He had no intention of signing away his soul. His gaze shifted to the archival files on the three monoliths. The first, the spatial monolith, had ripped Gemma across galaxies and deposited her within the Death Star's cells, where the Hive writhed in captivity. The second, the temporal monolith, bent time and space until the past, present, and future overlapped. The third, the creation monolith, exhaled reality itself, forging matter from the void. Countless factions, alien empires, extra-dimensional invaders, even Hydra, had waged war with S-Shield over these stones. Since the agency's second season, each monolith had emerged at the heart of its most perilous missions. Clutching his notes, Ethan steeled himself. He was determined to unravel their mysteries and survive what came next. Because the storyline was drastically truncated in the last 2 seasons, the Monolith staff remained an unsolved mystery until the very end of the series. Stripped of any clear origin or purpose, it became a genuine enigma. Yet Ethan was determined. If he could get his hands on that staff, he would study it relentlessly, and he pledged never to use its power himself. When he uncovered the location of the hidden Hydra research base where the staff was secured, he wasted no time. After all, this artifact could hold the key to his own advancement, and he refused to let Hydra, or anyone else, lock it away forever. For years, S-Shield had been probing the Cosmic Cube with little to show for their efforts. They'd captured Hydra's energy weapons and power cores, but remained entirely dependent on the very technologies they sought to suppress. Ethan slipped into the base without raising an alarm. First came a subtle, hypnotic suggestion that lulled the guards into a stupor. Then Galvatron's sudden invasion paralyzed the entire facility. Under cover of chaos, Ethan strode through the main gate, and with a focused burst of his biological force field, he disintegrated the iron barriers that sealed the entrance. This wasn't a last-ditch miracle triggered by reflex, as Superman's power sometimes seemed to work. It was the product of months spent mastering the force field, enabling him to unleash it exactly when and where he needed it. Ethan's discovery hit him like a thunderclap. The so-called bioforce field wasn't just a neat side effect. It was a true supernatural power, as tangible as telekinesis, but infinitely more flexible. After the surgical enhancements and painstaking training, he no longer had to strike himself to channel energy. With a single thought, the bioforce field now radiated outward, enveloping everything in its wake. In effect, it had become his ultimate full-screen attack, capable of striking every opponent in range simultaneously. He flexed his wrist, imagining the invisible wave of force surging forth, and grinned. This was nothing short of awesome. A voice crackled through his earpiece. "Ethan, come with us. The boss wants you to see something." He followed the escorts down a sterile corridor to a high-security lab. There, on a reinforced pedestal, hovered the cosmic cube, a perfect cobalt-blue polyhedron. Inside its translucent facets, strange motes of light drifted like galaxies in miniature, each one pulsing with ancient power. Ethan's heart quickened. The cube was legendary, a device said to shape reality itself. Normally, it lay dormant, its surface matte and muted, but the instant Ethan stepped forward, the inner radiance flared as if it recognized him. He halted, caution warring with curiosity. The cube, he'd been warned, had a will of its own, sometimes silent for millennia, sometimes awakening without warning. An officer murmured at his side, "It's bound to respond only to those it deems worthy." Remember Red Skull's fate, cursed by the cube to guard the soul gem, his mind driven to serenity so profound he longs for his own death. Ethan swallowed. The weight of that story settled over him. Here, at this moment, he would have to prove himself, to the cube, to his superiors, and ultimately to destiny itself. He took a steadying breath and reached out. Ethan's heart pounded. If they continued to treat him this way, he wasn't sure even his time travel ability could get him out alive. "I promise, I mean no harm," he said, holding up his hands in a gesture of peace. "I only want to use your power to reach the ether particle, that spatial coordinate where the reality gem is located." Chapter 119, All Wishes Come True. Ethan took a steady breath and reached out, fingertips brushing the smooth surface of the cosmic cube. For all he knew, the cube might understand any language, or none at all. Either way, he had no choice but to follow Captain Marvel's example, make contact, and see what happened. The instant his skin met the cube's edge, it ignited in a searing blue glow that flooded the entire base. The brilliance was almost blinding. Ethan's heart hammered as a cold, corrosive energy leapt onto his arms. In seconds, the fabric of his sleeves crumbled to ash, and he felt the raw power of a space gem tearing at his flesh. He'd never experienced anything so ferocious. If this was only the Space Stone's might, what would it be like to touch the Power Stone? Panic threatened to overwhelm him, but then the Doomsday gene roared to life within his veins. Almost instantly, that alien energy recoiled, repelled by the inhuman resilience coursing through his body. Ethan flexed his fingers and tested his joints. Not even a scratch remained. He allowed himself a wry smile. "My body is stronger than the Hulk's, stronger than Thanos's." Whatever the cosmic cube had in store, he was ready. After all wishes come true, and Ethan intended to claim his. Ethan stood before the cosmic cube, its unstable energies crackling like a storm contained within a glass sphere. He raised one hand and spoke with calm confidence. "Your energy erosion may be potent, but it's nothing to me." He had no intention of smashing the cube's external shell just to seize the space gem trapped inside. Doing so now, before he'd mastered even a fraction of its power, would be reckless. Instead, Ethan focused inward. Slowly, he channeled his own will against the cube's roiling might, weaving a subtle countercurrent that quelled its fury. The brilliant light dimmed. The cube stilled. In that sudden silence, Ethan felt something shift deep within him. A spark of understanding, a key to unlocking the cube's secrets. He grasped the method of wielding its power. The realization struck him like lightning. In the original timeline, Asgard had only ever teased the cube's surface potential. Their finest achievement, the Rainbow Bridge, could teleport across the cosmos and even shatter stars, but when Thor first destroyed it, no one had managed to rebuild it. Rumor held that restoring the bridge required reclaiming the cube itself. Thanos, too, had drawn on the Infinity Stones at the Well of Eternity, yet never tapped the cube's inner mechanics. Yet here and now, Ethan had done exactly that. He understood the cube in a way no other being, mortal or divine, ever had. True, his command would never equal the raw might of the space gem alone, but it was more than enough for what lay ahead. Ethan closed his eyes, feeling the cube's essence pulse in harmony with his own will. A new path had opened, a way to travel the stars, reshape reality, and set the course of the universe. And he was ready. Ethan raised an eyebrow. Fine, I'll do whatever I want. He exhaled slowly, gathering his focus, and the next instant, a churning blue-black vortex ripped open the fabric of space before him. It was the portal summoned by the cosmic Rubik's Cube. So long as Ethan could picture a destination, the cube could ferry him there in the blink of an eye. Like Thanos slipping between worlds, Ethan stepped through. He emerged into a wind-whipped wasteland. At its heart stood a colossal stone obelisk, its surface covered in runes that pulsed with a strange, humming energy. Ethan drew near, feeling raw power crackle beneath his fingertips. This is it, the chamber where the ether was sealed. His goal had been simple, to claim the ether particles, and the cube had obliged by opening a direct passage to their hiding place. Harvesting them would bring him one step closer to uniting the Infinity Stones. With the ether in hand, the Power Stone and the Mind Stone would soon follow. But Ethan knew the final two, time and soul, would demand far greater cunning. After all, the Mind Stone, Adi lay in Thanos' iron-gripped palm, and that promised to be the deadliest challenge of all. Ethan sat alone in the dimly lit chamber, replaying the recent reports over and over in his mind. Thanos had already claimed the Mind Scepter. He'd wiped out an entire civilization to seize the relic. With that power now in the Mad Titan's grasp, the other Infinity Stones had never felt more urgent or more out of reach. First came the Time Stone. Normally, only the Ancient One could grant access, and she had refused. In Ethan's experience, no one else could bend time like her. Desperate, he revisited a theory he'd gleaned from the speedster's journals. If you could truly surpass light speed, you might slip outside time itself. Ethan's pulse quickened at the thought. If he could push himself faster than any being before him, perhaps he could snatch the Time Stone from its temporal prison. But the very idea flirted with madness. Few mortals had ever dared, and even fewer had lived to tell the tale. Then there was the Soul Gem. Rumors said that to unlock its power, one had to surrender someone dear, the ultimate, heartbreaking sacrifice. Ethan remembered how Black Widow and Hawkeye had faced this cruel choice. Natasha had offered her life for Clint's. He'd been ready to do the same. Clint's love for Natasha ran deep. He'd risked everything to save her, even though he had a family waiting at home. Watching them both teeter on the edge of that sacrifice tore at Ethan's heart. Was the gem's demand truly a loophole in the universe's design, or was it a test of genuine love? Either way, it was a price he wasn't sure he could or would pay. Ethan rose, determination lighting his eyes. He didn't know if he'd warp time, outrun light, or confront the moral abyss of the Soul Gem. But one thing was clear. If the stone stayed in Thanos' possession, the universe would be beyond saving. And so, with every doubt burning in his chest, he prepared to strike, no matter what the cost. Ethan's heart sank as he watched the ether particles seep from the stone pillars. The once brilliant golden runes turned a sickly, rust red, and the drifting motes streamed straight toward him, merging with his flesh and blood. In the original narrative, the ether chose Jane Foster, but it wasn't because she was somehow destined to bear them. Jane simply didn't have enough vitality. The particles consumed her life force far too rapidly. Now, it was Ethan's turn. His knees threatened to buckle under the sudden resonance surging through him. He staggered, clutching his chest as an icy dread washed over him. "They're draining me, absorbing my life force," he gasped. But Ethan refused to yield. His doomsday-like adaptability flared to life, anchoring him against the onslaught. He reached inward and, with surprising ease, dispelled the gems, the so-called infinite gems that lose all special properties once ripped from their native universe, reverting to nothing more than ordinary stones. Extracting them would be trivial when the time came. What truly mattered to Ethan was not the gems themselves, but the particles' uncanny power to reshape reality, and for that, he was willing to pay the price in life energy. Still, he would need to find a way to stabilize the seal before these runaway particles consumed every last spark of his strength. Chapter Text: Etheric Ascendance. Etheric particles, heed my will, Ethan commanded, his voice resonating through the silent void. In an instant, a ribbon of crimson light coalesced around him, curling and shifting like living smoke. This was the raw, untamed power of etheric particles at work, reshaping his very biology. Ethan closed his eyes and focused, feeling the complex interplay of three extraordinary genomes within him: the relentless Doomsday strain, the fearsome Broly lineage, and his own Kryptonian heritage. Under the ether's influence, these diverse codes wove together seamlessly, forging a new, perfected metagenome. A thrill shot through him. "It's working," he murmured, eyes snapping open with renewed resolve. This breakthrough, surpassed even his stellar engine modifications and the black hole engine redefinitions he'd labored over. True, the Super Seminary's void ability could reinterpret supergenes and guide their evolution, but it was bound by the conventions of its source. Etheric particles, by contrast, answered to no known law of reality. They were a multiversal force beyond reason. By harnessing them, Ethan had finally achieved what he once thought impossible. Suddenly, an explosive shockwave tore through the surrounding space, as if the very fabric of the universe resisted his transformation. Ethan's hair shot upward, now a brilliant gold, and his eyebrows followed suit. But the most striking change lay in his eyes. Instead of the customary green of Kryptonian power, his irises burned with molten gold, reflecting the unprecedented synthesis of forces within him. In that moment, Ethan stood reborn, an apex warrior forged by the might of ether itself. Super Saiyan, 50-fold increase in combat power. Ethan felt that surge of strength as pure omnipotence, as if he could obliterate the Milky Way with a casual flick of his wrist. "So this is the legendary Super Saiyan," he whispered in awe. His golden hair shot upright, and then, in an instant, it turned a vibrant green, pulsing with life. A brilliant emerald aura exploded outward, warping the very fabric of the dimension around him. The raw energy threatened to tear this pocket world apart, nearly yanking Ethan back into reality by force. Chapter 120. Fusion Success. Ethan's body convulsed as if caught in a vice of burning ice. His flesh tore and reshaped itself. Skin that had once been warm and supple now turned to slate gray, hard as rock. White bone spines burst through muscle and sinew, racing up his arms and legs. Along his spine, jagged ridges sprouted like the crown of a deadly coral reef. His scapulae spread into armored plates, and every joint, elbows, knees, even knuckles, grew spear-like protrusions, naturally forged weapons for crushing blows. A bestial snarl ripped from his throat as his face remade itself into something terrifyingly inhuman. His height exploded upward until he loomed over 3 meters tall. This was Doomsday Unleashed, the legendary Super Saiyan form fused with the ancient Doomsday gene, now further modified by ether particles rerouted to their genetic source. Power flooded through Ethan's veins like molten metal, limitless, roaring, and terrifying. Every cell burned with the gene's mutating will, rebelling against the etheric enhancements even as they pumped him full of unimaginable strength. He staggered, one gargantuan fist clenched at his side, mind reeling under the onslaught of raw mutation. "Impossible," he gasped. This can't be what I wanted." The ground quaked beneath him, and in that moment, Ethan realized he stood not at the brink of victory, but on the edge of total obliteration. His own. They're not even on the same level, and yet now they can shrug off ether particle alterations? Ethan stared at the readout in disbelief. He'd always known the Doomsday strain possessed virtually limitless potential, but that was the ancient strain, the original terror. The version before him now was a mere bioweapon, a shadow of its primordial self. And yet, after only a few rounds of ether particle enhancement, it had begun developing genuine resistance to reality warping effects. Even if the gene couldn't completely repel the ether's influence, the pressure of each failed modification was feeding back into its structure, driving a furious cycle of mutation and evolution. "Incredible," Ethan whispered. If Doomsday really learns to fight off these particles, what happens next? Will I end up living like Doomsday? He shook his head. He'd never imagined that such preliminary ether tinkering could push the Doomsday genome so far, letting it grow ever more powerful and unstable with each passing moment. Ethan stood alone in the heart of his laboratory's containment chamber, surrounded by a swirling maelstrom of ether particles. By his design, these particles were meant to splice together three of the universe's most dangerous genetic codes: the Doomsday genome, the Kryptonian gene, and the legendary Super Saiyan mutation. Instead, as the fusion process began, the raw, unyielding instinct of Doomsday erupted from his DNA with uncanny speed, vastly outstripping even the Broly adaptability he'd anticipated. This was no simple enhancement. It was a primal command to survive and destroy, utterly indifferent to any conscious will or allegiance. The ether currents recoiled, unable to force their restructuring against such relentless genetic drive. Ethan's heart pounded as realization set in. The Doomsday gene had grown too dominant, actively resisting every strand of foreign code. He clutched the chain around his neck, where the reality gem pulsed with faint power. "I have to get the power gem," he whispered, voice tense. "If I can channel its energy through the reality gem, maybe I can override this mutation, just long enough to reassert control." Yet even as hope flared, doubt gnawed at him. He didn't know the upper limit of his new Doomsday potential, only that it closely rivaled the legendary ancient behemoth. His experiment with the black hole engine, which he believed could tame any genome, suddenly looked like a fatal mistake. If he failed now, the monster he'd been harnessing would claim full dominion, and Ethan might find himself transformed into the very ruin he'd sought to master. "This thing is too dangerous," Ethan muttered, staring down the writhing mass of the Doomsday gene. Its power was unlike anything he'd ever faced, an ancient code so volatile that reality itself seemed to rebel. Desperation drove him to twist time and entropy against the gene, a gambit that felt as reckless as it was necessary. After all, the Omega Effect Ray should have overridden any such tactic. Yet here he stood, balancing on the edge of cosmic undoing. With a grunt, Ethan produced the Cosmic Cube, rumored by some to be a Rubik's Cube of the universe, its facets alive with etheric energy. The cube's power collided with the Doomsday gene in a blinding flash, sending a wave of vertigo crashing through him. Then, just as abruptly, the cube tore open a swirling vortex. Ethan didn't pause to question it. He vaulted forward and was gone. When he opened his eyes again, he found himself on Morag. The sky was a permanent twilight, the ground a desolate wasteland of cracked stone. A lone, mouse-sized creature scurried across the parched earth, more curiosity than threat. Somewhere beyond those ruins lay the Power Gem, also called the Power Stone, the very artifact Star-Lord and his ragtag crew had come for. Ethan recalled reports of how War Machine's punch had once knocked Peter Quill cold here, shattering temple pillars in the process. Trusting his enhanced senses, Ethan tracked the gem's unique energy signature to a battered temple rising from the dust. Along its entrance ran a lattice of glowing runes, ancient wards designed to bar all comers. Ethan didn't hesitate. He drew back his fist and delivered a single thunderous blow. The ward splintered under the impact, the air shaking like a struck drum. Chunks of masonry rained down, and with the echo of his victory still ringing, Ethan stepped inside, resolute. The power gem would be his before anyone else arrived. Ethan's fist drove into the cosmic spirit orb with the force of an exploding star. The ground beneath him cracked and buckled, tremors racing outward until they ripped open a vast crater. The orb's outer shell shuddered under the impact, splintering into fragments that rattled through the air and were hurled thousands of meters away by the blast, every bit as powerful as a nuclear detonation. But Ethan was faster. He sprang forward, intercepting the disintegrating orb mid-flight. With a sudden squeeze of his fingers, he crushed the remaining shell to dust, revealing the heart of the artifact, a power stone, its surface a throbbing, amethyst light. The gem pulsed with raw, terrifying energy, enough to scorch a god's flesh. The instant it made contact with him, that searing violet power tried to pour into his veins. At that moment, Ethan's sun-born gene suppression flared to life. Like a solar flare consuming starlight, it devoured the invading energy in a single breath, neutralizing the Power Stone's lethal assault before it could take root in his body. He didn't have the Infinity Gauntlet to anchor both the ether particles within him and the unleashed power of the stone. Yet his superhuman strength paid no heed to such limitations. Clenching the gem in his palm as though it were no more than a common pebble, Ethan felt its energy pulse in time with the ether particle currents he already commanded. And with that, the Power Stone had a new master. The power gem erupted in a blinding violet flare, instantly incinerating Morag's surface. From orbit, Ethan watched in stunned silence as half the planet simply vanished, evaporated into nothingness, and the remainder was consumed by the gem's unleashed energy until it collapsed into an asteroid no larger than a moon. As the power gem amplified and supercharged the surrounding ether particles, their containment shell finally shattered, revealing the gleaming scarlet reality gem at its core. In that moment, the combined might of both gems surged through Ethan, threatening to tear him apart from the inside. Even the latent doomsday gene within him could not resist. Its destructive potential was utterly suppressed by these overwhelming forces. Gradually, the violent surges subsided, and Ethan's body began to settle and reform. When the dust cleared, standing in the void of space, he realized with awe that the legendary Super Doomsday Kryptonian had been reborn. Ethan closed his eyes and felt the raw power humming through every fiber of his being. The ether particles had reconstructed and fully restored his Kryptonian DNA, undoing every deletion or flaw. He was now a pure-born Kryptonian, awakened to a new level of strength, and ready to face whatever the universe might throw at him next. Ethan may not possess the countless Kryptonian genes encoded in the life code, but he shed the genetic flaws and limits that come with them. Among all naturally born Kryptonians, Silver Superman still towers above the rest, his powers seemingly boundless. Ethan isn't convinced he'll ever match Silver Superman's strength, but his own abilities have grown by leaps and bounds. Could it be the Reality Stone and the Power Stone at work? He wonders. Since his exposure to those Infinity Stones, Ethan's tapped into two distinct gifts, raw power and reality manipulation. His reality-warping talent rivals Majin Buu's transformation magic in sheer flexibility, yet it's not without its shortcomings. Every alteration he makes draws on his personal energy reserves. The more energy he pours into a change, the broader and more potent its effect.